Pumpitout Radio, www.pumpitout.com. Pumpitout. Pumpitout.com. Pumpitout. Pumpitout Radio, www.pumpitout.com.
Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in to Pumpitout Radio tonight, this Sunday, January 30th, 2011. A special impromptu episode here with a couple of special guests tonight. John-Michael Talboo and Adam Taylor, both from 9/11 Debunkers with an S.blogspot.com. Welcome to Pumpitout Radio, guys. Thanks for being able to come on here tonight.
Hey, thanks for having us, Jeff. But as you well know, it's John Talboo, John-Michael Talboo. I thought I had lots of technical difficulties tonight, so I won't hold it against you.
I'm so sorry. I'll never make the mistake again. But if that's the least of our problems tonight, I think we'll be styling.
Yeah, we're doing good.
We've all talked together a few times over the phone, and we've discussed various aspects of 9/11 and everything. I think we all agree that we weren't told the truth about 9/11. What happened that day on September 11th, 2001. Would you guys agree?
Absolutely. Yes, we definitely agree on that.
Well, how about I start with, how about you, John-Michael? When did you realize that what we were told wasn't actually what the real story was?
You know, I think inherently I kind of knew that from the get-go because I knew something wasn't right. Just looking at the way the towers fell, I remember remarking to my father at the time, saying to him, you know, how did they know that if the planes hit at those exact spots that those towers would fall like that? I thought that must have been what it was.
So right on the day of 9/11, you had suspicions that there was something strange?
Yeah, something strange. I'm not saying that I thought it was... I thought that for the towers to fall as if they did, I thought that they would have had to have known that if they hit the planes on those exact spots, that must have made the towers fall like that. So I think, yes, in the back of my head, something wasn't right. The way the towers fell, that didn't seem right to me. I figured they must have known that the planes hitting at those exact spots would have done it. So I was making those remarks to my father, and he said, oh, they must have had the blueprints. And I said, yeah, maybe that's it. I guess that's it. So did I really know what was going on? No, of course I didn't. Something didn't seem right. And, I mean, of course, that was ludicrous on its face to think that, oh, if they hit it in those exact spots, that's why the towers would have fell as they did. You get what I'm saying. I mean, it's just that inherently it didn't make sense to me that the towers fell in the way that they did, so I was trying to come up with reasons as to why that would have happened. Beyond that, as time went on, just like mostly everybody, I accepted the official story. There were obviously people that didn't, and kudos to them. You know, as time went on, I accepted the propaganda that was given to us, and it was only later, after listening to the show Coast to Coast AM, where I started to hear about all of the theories that are out there and the information that's out there.
And there sure are a lot of theories out there, aren't there? So I would imagine that as the more you looked into it, the more sure you became that there's definitely something funny going on here.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. And that's the funny thing. I mean, people say, like, oh, the mainstream media covers it up, and that's kind of what I was getting at, is that they don't really. I mean, a lot of this is in the mainstream. It's out there. It's just connecting those dots. It's putting the puzzle pieces together. They don't tell you the whole story, and then when they do tell you the important pieces, it's not on the front page. You know, it's buried, and then they don't try to connect this bit of information to that bit of information to make a better picture of what's going on. This is something that Paul Thompson talks about in 9/11 Press for Truth, how it's all out there. It's just not connected.
Right.
Yeah.
I've came to realize that too myself. You know, the mainstream, they have been putting out what they can. Obviously, they have higher powers that say what can go out on the airwaves and what can't, but to the best of their ability, they have tried to give us as much information as they could through their mainstream news outlets. And even that guy that wrote the commission, the uncensored history of the 9/11 Commission report, Phil Sheenan, the New York Times reporter. Obviously, he wouldn't have been able to write all that stuff in the New York Times, so the only thing he could do is put out a book that probably most of the people out there in 9/11 Truth probably didn't read.
I definitely didn't want to believe any of it. You know, I didn't want to think that was the case. Like I said, I thought these people were crazy, and it was only after looking at the facts that I started to realize they're not. Through my journeys, I've tried to look at the counter information. People that connect the dots, are they connecting them correctly? Does it really lead to complicity or involvement in the attacks? So that's where I got into looking at the debunking information. Through that journey, it's only strengthened my belief that there is complicity there.
Right, that's a good thing to do, is like Jim D3100 said, take whatever theory you think is true, try your hardest to debunk it and see what happens. Because there's going to be somebody out there that's going to try, especially like the J-Reppers. So.
Yeah, they help us a lot. The debunkers help a lot. They like to say, you know, we're not here to fact check you guys, to point out little things that you got wrong. We're here to point out that everything you're doing is wrong. That's just not the case. We demonstrate that on the blog every single day that we make a post. The blog's been going since 2008, you know, 2011 now, and we have over 500 posts to prove what we're saying.
Kevin Ryan, he just put out an article today that deals with this very subject. His article is called Why Robert Perry is Right About 9/11 Truth. That's the guy who put out the 9/11 Truth movement is a parlor game. Kevin Ryan just put out an article this morning about this very subject here that you were just mentioning about the debunkers, and they just debunk everything and they don't believe anything, even though there is a lot of stuff that is fact and evidence that they can't deny unless they're lying to themselves. But it's a really good article. I would recommend people go and read that one. But what about you, Adam? When did you start to realize that there might have been something more than what we were told going on about that day?
When 9/11 happened, I was only in the 5th grade, so it was a huge event that I didn't quite know how to comprehend because I was really young. I was only about 10. So at the time, I just kind of accepted it for what it was. And as the years went on, I learned more about 9/11 and what it really meant. I wasn't really questioning it yet. I mean, over the years, I was just hearing about all these different theories about 9/11, people saying things like, oh, a missile hit the Pentagon, or the towers were brought down with demolition, and I didn't really give any credibility to it. I didn't think there was anything to those theories. I thought it sounded too nutty. I thought maybe the government knew more about the attacks than they're telling the public, but I didn't think they actually contributed to it.
How could our own government be complicit in the mass murder of over 3,000 of their own people kind of deal?
Right. I didn't think they would do it, and also I didn't know how they could have done it. I thought there's no way they could have had the means to do it. Then in 2007, I was just flipping through TV, and I came across a documentary on the History Channel called 9/11 Conspiracies, Fact or Fiction, which I'm sure a lot of people have seen. Just came across it by accident and thought, well, I've been hearing a lot about these theories, but I guess I haven't really listened to a detailed explanation about them, so I watched it, and, you know, it was a major debunking piece, of course. Thought it was really interesting because there was a lot more problems with the official story than what I'd understood at that point. Now, I'd seen all the different theories laid out, and even though they were debunking them, I did have the sense that the answers to these problems didn't seem adequate. So after watching it, I just kind of thought, you know what, I'd better look at this just to make sure what they're saying is true. To do that, I decided to watch the film Loose Change, because they had talked about that a lot in the documentary. I went online the next week and watched it, and was really blown away because I had no idea there were all these inconsistencies with the official story. I wouldn't say I was totally convinced at that point, but I decided I need to research this more.
And yeah, it was enough to get you to look into it more because you had more questions.
Yeah, the more and more material was presented to me, the more questions I had and the more I felt I needed to look into this. After researching more, looking at a lot of websites and seeing more documentaries, I became more and more convinced and decided that this really needed to be researched, that this wasn't something that could just be brushed off. And I thought, enough people believe in this that there has to be something to it.
You would be in a better situation than a lot of people because you're younger. So you're more open to the possibilities there could be certain things going on that we're not told, whereas older people out there, especially like 50 or 60 and older people like that, where their worldview's already formed, for them to imagine anything other than what they believed all their life, it would destroy their whole worldview, and they would have to admit that they've been lied to all their life. So that's a good thing for you since you were younger.
Yeah. At that age, 9/11 was really the first real-world event I'd ever encountered in my life. It was the first serious thing I'd ever seen. It was witnessing the beginning of one of the first wars of my lifetime. So it was very significant to me in that sense. And after I watched the documentary and got interested in this, after a few years, I was just looking online and not thinking I would ever really do anything big for the truth movement. I thought maybe I could help a little bit, but I didn't know if I could do anything particularly significant. And then what happened in around 2009, I saw that the new Loose Change film was coming out, Loose Change 9/11 American Coup, and I was excited about that. And from time to time, I would go to the Loose Change website and the forum to see just what people were talking about. And one day I looked on the forum and I saw someone had a link to John-Michael's website, 9/11 Debunkers. So I clicked on it and thought, this looks like a pretty cool website. I'm glad they're doing this. And I was getting into looking into what the debunkers were saying too, because I knew there were debunkers out there trying to refute these things. I was kind of working on my own debunking of them too, and after I had made some videos on that, I sent them to John-Michael's YouTube channel, and he liked my videos and said, if you have more, send them to me, I'll put them on my website. I did keep making stuff, and he liked it a lot, and after a few months of this, he finally just said, would you like to become a contributor to the blog? And I said, sure, I've never written for a website before, but I'll be happy to contribute what I can. Since then, I've been writing for the website and very happy contributor.
So, John-Michael, you were the one who started the 9/11debunkers.blogspot.com then? Or did you start on Visibility? Like, I know you have a blog on Visibility 9/11 with Michael Woolsey. Was this?
Yeah, I do.
Okay. So 9/11debunkers.blogspot, that's your original website that you started up from the beginning then?
Correct. I started that in August of 2008, shortly after the NIST report on World Trade Center 7. I became what I consider pretty much a full-fledged 9/11 truther in late 04. As I was describing, I had questions early on, and then those turned into bigger questions. But I think in late 04 is when I really became deeply involved. And I had another website that is now, no longer existent, that I worked on the issue a little bit with. But it wasn't until 08 that I, started the Debunking Debunkers blog, and that's where I focused all my energy since then. Kind of found my, my little niche in the movement. And it was a little while after that to where Michael Woolsey actually heard me on Stan Monteith's radio show on GCN, that me and him hooked up, and we became pretty quick friends after that. And a little while after that, or quite a while after that, he actually asked me to go ahead and be a contributor to his blog as well. And I don't do much there. I post a blog here and there. I try to focus most of my efforts on the Debunking the Debunkers blog. So, yeah, that was my main focus. It still is, because I believe there's a lot to be garnered from taking on the debunkers' arguments. I think it helps us fine-tune what we're doing. And a lot of people, say that we should just kind of ignore what they do, just put out our information, and they say, what's the point of debating with these people all the time? And I say it all the time, and I'll say it again. The point is that there are, first of all, a lot of people who do not want to believe this is true. They have cognitive dissonance, and just as I did, and they want to believe that their government is not that heinous. They might believe the government is corrupt, but not that corrupt. And so they do look to these debunking pieces, whether they do it subconsciously or whatever the fact may be.
Well, I like to stress the point, though, that I always try to do this when talking about September 11th, is that the government is not bad. It's bad people that have infiltrated the government that are bad.
True. Very true. And we make that point ourselves.
Okay.
But the point is, if they look to these debunking pieces, it makes them feel, more secure in what's going on. I think that it's the perfect answer to their cognitive dissonance, So that's one reason that it's important to rebut them. But the other thing is that there's a lot of people that are just on the fence when it comes to these issues, and they're kind of looking at the debate. And so it's not necessarily to convince the person that you're debating with, but to, convince the person that's looking at the debate, to show them that you can take these people head on, and that, you are strong in your convictions when it comes to this issue.
I still find it strange that something like the JREF forum established itself in August of 2001, just 1 month before September 11th, 2001. Just one of those things that make me go,
Yeah, James Randi has been a debunker of, paranormal claims, lots of things like that for a long time. When the forum sprang up, who knows if that has anything to do with anything.
No, I know. It's just always one of those things that just made me wonder. But obviously, it's whatever it is, it is. But
it's more of his followers that talk about these things more than him. I don't know that he has ever talked about 9/11 or anything like that. I actually respect a lot of the work that James Randi has done. I have an interest in those subjects as well. But without getting into that, I will say that he has definitely debunked a lot of pseudoscience and a lot of crap that's out there.
A lot of that stuff's easy to debunk. But, when it comes to 9/11, there's stuff that just can't be debunked unless they're just trying to, make any and every excuse not to believe that there is something more to the story. But certain things they just cannot debunk no matter how hard they try. I know that for a fact now, But there are a lot of aspects of 9/11 that, I'm sure you guys like to look into, and everybody has their own special, branch off of what they like to look into. I understand.
I like to look into all of it. We do tackle everything on the blog. I've said in the past that, controlled demolition is focused on too much. I still believe that's true, but I don't always hold true to that myself. We talk about it quite a bit, but sometimes it's just, what's going on in the movement, what's getting the most traction, that type of thing. But yeah, we try to talk about all the subjects concerning 9/11.
Well, what I've found lately is that a lot of these people in the so-called 9/11 truth movement are of no use when it comes to getting to the truth about what happened that day. They seem to like all these interesting conspiracy theories more than they like facts and evidence, especially when it comes to a lot of the really, really, really ridiculous theories that I myself was foolish enough to believe at one time or another, but no longer do because I've smartened up. But there's people that...
Conspiracy theories are more sexy, aren't they?
They are, yes. They're a lot more sexy and interesting than having to read through documents and stuff. Always easier to watch a YouTube video or something and get the truth in a 10-minute clip, or have Jesse Ventura go and put it on TV for you.
Yeah.
But I notice you guys do, like, when we've talked before, you and Adam seem very knowledgeable in the area of the demolitions of the towers. Something that I myself personally don't focus on very much, like I said, because I'm not a physicist, I'm not an engineer, I'm not anything like that. But I have talked, like I said before, I talked to David Chandler a few times, and we've talked about it, like as much as we could talk about it, where he's answered every single point that I shot at him that I saw that debunkers use when they try to say that, the official story is true. And he's basically told me, with his expertise in physics and everything, that there's just absolutely no way that those towers and World Trade Center 7 came down because fire weakened the steel. And I believe that. I know that in my heart to be true, but I can't prove that myself. But like Adam, you were talking about the thermetic materials, etc., that a lot of the professionals talk about, and you seem to have a very knowledgeable understanding about that area. Like, what makes you so sure that that's the answer?
Well, I would say that in terms of thermite being used, it's not necessarily the only thing used to destroy the towers, but I do think it is something that we have positively found in the dust of the World Trade Center, and it's certainly material that shouldn't be there. And if someone else has an explanation for why it was there, great. But the fact is, it is an explosive material, and it can cut and melt through steel. So, you know, the conclusion we have so far is that if the towers were destroyed with controlled demolition, this is what most likely would have been used.
So as I understand it, there was some sort of spores that were found, or iron and aluminum spores or something like that?
Yes, there were iron-rich microspheres found in the dust, and these iron microspheres carry many of the chemicals that are found in thermite. I know that Dr. Stephen Jones has done several experiments with thermite and comparing the spheres produced from thermite with the spheres found in the World Trade Center dust, and they do match. He's talked about this for many years, and that they are the same types of spheres.
Right, okay. And as David Chandler explained to me, that these compounds, or the makeup of these spheres, could not possibly have just formed from the different elements of the towers coming together. They had to be purposely formed that way. They couldn't have just accidentally formed the way they were found to be.
Right. That's exactly right. You know, that's the thing that people should understand. You know, the kind of elements that are found, like, you know, iron, oxygen, aluminum, potassium, manganese. You know, admittedly, all these materials, they are common in building material. You know, even though thermite itself is a fairly rare substance, the stuff that makes it up is not that rare, but it's the way in which they're found. They're all in these iron-rich microspheres, and all these materials, they can't be formed just by fire, because they all have different melting points. First of all, fire, an open office fire can't melt iron, so that's the first thing. But these other materials, they all have so many different melting points that there's going to be a sizable time delay from heating some of these materials and then heating the other materials, and of course then they have to cool together at the same time to form a sphere. It's very hard to do that without some kind of mechanism, but thermite is a mechanism that can do that.
Mm-hmm. So it's almost like comparing it to, say, like the anthrax that they're trying to blame that Bruce Ivans for. Like, it's not like he could have just whipped this kind of stuff up in his basement. Like, this is very, you know, weaponized, the most weaponized anthrax. So it's not like some terrorists in Iraq could have just put this together, or it was like it was done very methodically by people that really knew what they were doing, obviously.
Right. I mean, normal thermite, as Stephen Jones has said, you know, you can get thermite on eBay, but nanothermite, which is what they said they have discovered, is very difficult to produce, and only, you know, really a handful of scientists in the world can do it. And interestingly, as Kevin Ryan pointed out in his article, the top 10 connections between NIST and nanothermites, NIST has some of the top experts in nanothermite.
And when it comes to the iron-rich spheres, Jim Hoffman points out on his website, 911research.wtc7.net, that debunkers have proposed that the iron-rich spheres were the result of fly ash residues embedded in the tower's concrete. But he points out that the iron in the fly ash, they are oxides rather than elemental iron. And then we also have nano-aluminum in these red-gray nanothermite chips. So the elements, they're just not the same. They're very constructed materials. I believe Niels Harris said they have to be built from the ground up. You know, these are very complex materials. Then you look at the red-gray chips, and when they ignite these chips in a differential scanning calorimeter, at 430 or 450 centigrade, they react, and then they actually produce molten iron spheres. So debunkers have proposed that these are, paint chips, for instance, and paint of any sort will not produce a high-temperature chemical reaction that will produce molten iron spheres. So the same spheres that we're finding in the dust, lo and behold, these nanothermite chips, they actually produce them. They actually show that a high-temperature chemical reaction is taking place. Mm-hmm. Would you agree with all of that, Adam?
Yeah, absolutely. And what I would add, too, is, the argument from some debunkers, they talk about iron spheres could have come from just within the buildings from when they were first built, but a good indication that they didn't come from just the buildings, that something had to have produced them, that something else had to have made them, is that in the R.J. Lee report that was released, they investigated the dust from the World Trade Center for environmental studies, and they say that, you do find iron particles in building dust, but they say generally iron-rich particles only make up about 0.04% of building dust on average. With their study, they found that in some areas, iron particles had made up to as much as 5.87% of the dust. Now, that's roughly 150 times more iron particles and spheres in the dust than there should have been, according to R.J. Lee.
As far as Jim Hoffman goes, some of my favorite audios that I found the most educational that I've ever listened to concerning this issue were the ones he did with Guns and Butter. He did one, it was called Building a Better Mirage, NIST's cover-up of the crimes of the century. And he also did another one with them, Your Eyes Don't Lie, Common Sense Physics in the WTC Collapses, Part 1 and 2. So I would urge everybody, if they get a chance, to listen to those audios that he did back in 2004 and 2006, because I think they're some of the most excellent interviews I've heard on the subject. And like he said, the NIST report, it tells you everything and anything leading up to the initiation of collapse, but it never accounts for the total global collapse of the buildings, which I thought was very interesting.
They never modeled the total global collapse of the buildings, and Jim is in our upcoming film. Hopefully, it will be released this next anniversary of September 11th, and Jim talks extensively about the nanothermite issue, and so keep an eye out for that. Tentatively, it's going to be called 9/11 Undebunked Controlled Demolition, and we hope to take on other subjects concerning 9/11, but we're kind of starting out with controlled demolition. So Jim will be in the film. When it comes to this issue, too, as I pointed out before, the paper was peer-reviewed. All right, there's been attacks on the journal. First of all, recently, one of the professors that peer-reviewed the paper, he came out and went public, Professor Griscom. Now, debunkers have attacked him because he has some other thoughts about 9/11, which I don't agree with, and Adam, you don't agree with, and I know that you don't agree with, Jim. But that has nothing to do with whether he could adequately, peer-review this paper. He peer-reviewed, or he refereed at least 600 and as maybe as 1,000 manuscripts, according to him. And he was published himself 12 times in the American Institute of Physics Journal of Chemical Physics, and that's the exact type of paper this was. It was a chemical physics paper. So he's more than adequate when it comes to reviewing such a paper. Mm-hmm. Now, if you want to discount him despite all that because he is a quote-unquote truther, that's fine. I talked to Greg Roberts, who is one of the paper's authors, and I asked him if the other reviewer of the paper was a truther, and he said to me, quote, "The other reviewer was not a truther, and that reviewer provided a much less rigorous review than did Griscom, while also recommending publication if the review points were dealt with adequately." So there was another reviewer there who was not a truther in any way, shape, or form, and he also agreed with it. And then we have the fact that BYU administrators also reviewed the paper. Stephen Jones stated in comments at 9/11 Blogger that, quote, "BYU scientists did a review of the paper," and he said that led to changes in the report. And then in a previous post, Jones has said that the paper was peer-reviewed by the physics department chairman at BYU. And that was done because two of the authors are from that department. The chairman told him that, quote, it was sound scientific research and that he was now persuaded that explosives/pyrotechnics were involved in the destruction of the World Trade Center on 9/11. And then recently there was a person who came forward and, said that he could debunk the paper, and so he wrote a blog post purporting to debunk the paper. The interesting thing is that this person actually agrees that World Trade Center 7 was a controlled demolition. So he's not exactly, what the debunkers would like him to be, because he still thinks there was controlled demolition, whether it was thermite, involved or not.
Right. Well, I know there's this one physicist that I know he lives in France, and he spent a lot of time helping me realize my flawed understanding of physics when it came to the stuff I thought before. Okay. When it comes to the interactions of the planes and the World Trade Center. What he did was he also looked into, because of him helping me with that, figure out that I was wrong about that and that I was going on what I would call Fetzer physics, which is just a skewed understanding of physics, which has nothing based in reality. He also started to look into the demolitions of the towers, but he hasn't really had time to do his own thorough analysis of it. He did tell me that if he was to recommend material to me, he would recommend Jim Hoffman's site, and he would also recommend a site called True Mems. I don't know if you guys have heard about that one. He said True Mems would be a great introductory site concerning the destruction of the towers, but that was over a year ago. Now, David Chandler's site, 911speakout.org, I think is the best resource when it comes to getting information on the destruction of the towers. All the videos he has put together there, they're easy to understand, and it's perfect for 9/11 truthers because there's not a lot of reading involved. It's more video style, so I'm sure they could appreciate that a lot more than having to read. But what I wanted to know concerning the thermetic materials was, has there been any independent verification concerning the thermetic materials found aside from Stephen Jones? Like, as far as I understand it with my limited understanding, not that I'm right, but I thought I was under the assumption that all these other guys like Niels Harrod, etc., were just going on Stephen Jones's word that he found this stuff. Has there been other people besides Stephen Jones to independently verify without any of Stephen Jones's data?
Yeah. First of all, we have chemical engineer Mark Basile. He was not involved in the paper, but recently he stated on video for the documentary that AE911truth.org is about to release, which is called Explosive Evidence, 9/11 Explosive Evidence Experts Speak Out. He basically says that he has unequivocally confirmed the findings, and he actually obtained a completely independent sample of dust from a New York City museum as well. And he says that it is thermitic material. There's no question about it. If anybody wants to refute that, they need to do the forensic science themselves, and that's the thing. Nobody has. I was talking about that other researcher. I can maybe dig up his name here in a second. I can't remember it offhand. He wanted to criticize the paper, and he said that he had done a peer review of it. But all he did was publish a blog post where he criticizes the paper. And there's been people on his own comments that rebutted what he was saying. And it's funny because the man has published 100 peer-reviewed papers himself, so he should know better than to post a blog post and say that he's peer-reviewed something. Now, he brings up the point, there are things out there, theories out there or whatever, that people have put forward that haven't been rebutted in peer-reviewed journals, and that doesn't mean that it's, that it can't be rebutted. It just hasn't been done. The distinction that I see here is that it's not forensic science. What they did was forensic science. So if you want to say that you've peer-reviewed them, that you've, said something's wrong with it, first of all, I mean, if you're going to peer-review them, you would tell them, here's my concerns, and, do an experiment to prove that I'm wrong or whatever. But in the absence of being able to do that, the only thing you can do is to do forensic science yourself and prove that it's wrong. You can't just make a blog post and say that, you know what, it's so ridiculous that I can just post this and show that it's ridiculous. I don't actually have to do the work. And that's basically what he did. I'll get back to that in a second. But there was Mark Basile. He did confirm it. And then there was another, a French researcher. And he was able to confirm several aspects of their experiments. He was not able to confirm it completely. He was not able to say this is definitely nanothermite based on what I've been able to do. But he didn't have full access to everything. Like, they say they found red-gray chips and that the red side reacts. He had a red chip. He wasn't able to get it to react. But he just didn't have the right material to do it. He didn't have enough sample to work with, obviously, because he didn't even have any red-gray chips to work with.
Well, if I could play devil's advocate here for a second.
Sure.
When I talk to, the godfather of the official story when it comes to the World Trade Center collapses, Gene Corley, he told me that there was no way to prove chain of custody when it comes to looking at dust samples. So, therefore, any argument for finding anything or not would be irrelevant because the chain of custody could never really be proven.
Unfortunately, the particles in there would not be enough for us to do much with, and I would have to also hear what the chain of custody is on it. It's quite frankly, many people have their own interests in things, and unless the chain of custody is impeccable, then it doesn't exist.
Hmm.
When he questions the chain of custody, Jeff, he's basically insinuating that the samples were tampered with.
Right, I understand.
Debunkers, they try to play this thing like, oh, we're not saying they tampered with it. We've never heard of such a thing. We never said that. But they're implying it when they say that.
And people need to realize that Gene Corley was involved in the investigation at Waco, the investigation at Oklahoma City, and the godfather of the investigation of the World Trade Center collapses. So just him being at all three of these fishy situations, that just makes me go, but sorry. Go on.
I mean, and he asked them for their samples. Can we get your samples to test? And Debunkers thought, oh, well, they won't give up their samples, But he was involved in the FEMA investigation, right? They have their own samples. I mean, why is he asking for their limited samples that they have? To me, that's disingenuous. That French researcher, he had said, quote, the Harrod and Jones team convincingly show that the red-gray chips found in the World Trade Center dust that they show unreacted nanothermite. Now, I was talking about how he had a red chip as opposed to a red-gray chip.
It just sounds funny, when you say it, like it's a red chip, not a gray chip.
Yeah, potato chips, right? To speak to that, though, here, I'd like to read something I wrote on it. He says the one red-gray chip he was able to find could not be recovered for an ignition test, meaning basically it's too small. He lost it somehow when he was doing his research. And then Pat Curley from the Screw Loose Change blog, he basically thought this was, it was unimportant, that it didn't matter. There was no distinction to be made there. And, Pat says, although he mostly found red chips instead of red and gray ones, that doesn't matter because Jones claims that it was the red portion that showed the thermitic reaction. And I said, well, first off, as was pointed out, it wasn't mostly red chips instead of red and gray ones. It was all but one, which was so small that he wasn't able to recover it for testing. Secondly, it does matter that his chips were different. And I said, gee, is it just a coincidence that the only chips not to react were different from the ones that we know did react? And then I showed 2 videos of them reacting. So they do react. They got one of them to react with an oxyacetylene torch, and the other one reacted, as I spoke of, in the differential scanning calorimeter. And I said, of course, these reactions were not just observed by Jones & Company. They were also observed by Mark Basile. And he got them to react on a stainless steel strip, which he actually passed electricity through. So, and then I said, since the material has been separated from its backing, it is safe to assume that the reaction is already taking place. The red material still being present does not mean that it any longer contains the correct ratios of elements to be reactive. Or as somebody else said on our blog, Pat just might be shooting blanks. So, they do react. I said Victoria Ashley also believes that the researcher did not have the equipment needed to do the ignition test properly. Pat, on the other hand, believes that heat is heat. It doesn't matter either way, but let's be real clear here. The nanothermite authors use a differential scanning calorimeter for their ignition test. Vassil used a stainless steel resistive heating element, which he passed electricity through, and the other researcher used a furnace. So maybe it has to do with what he was using, but it could have to do also with just the type of sample he has, what he had at hand. He might not have had the best sampling at hand. The point is that they do react. We've seen them react. We've seen them react in several instances, and not just with the 9 researchers that did the paper, but Mark Vassil has also been able to get them react, and he's been able to get samples that had nothing to do with Stephen Jones, that he obtained all on his own. He's got those to react as well.
So without, say, just like hypothetically, taking Stephen Jones totally out of the picture, there would still be data and evidence leading to thermetic materials.
Absolutely. And Mark Vassil, when he first came into this, he had read the FEMA report, and he was very intrigued by it. He was intrigued by the WPI studies because that's where he got his degree from. Mm-hmm. And so he went to see Stephen speak, and he wanted to know the truth of this. And he actually went to Stephen and said, hey, can I get my hands on some of your samples because I'd like to either confirm or deny what you're doing, basically. I'm paraphrasing here, but so Stephen said, yeah, I'll give you some samples to look at. And from those samples, he says that he's confirmed his findings, but then he also got his own samples and still says that he's confirming his findings. And I've been made aware through comments of Stephen Jones that he's working on his own paper right now. Mm-hmm. So they do have independent confirmation. Yes.
And as far as, like, say, WTC7 is concerned, I find it very, very odd that I see some of these official experts that are on these Discovery Channel or History Channel documentaries supporting the official story on camera when it comes to World Trade Center 7. And now I've talked to a lot of them. And when I ask them about World Trade Center 7, they get very uncomfortable and they don't give me an answer. And it's like been, 9 years? And Najib Abood wouldn't comment on it, even though the investigation was officially already done. The guy who was working for Silverstein Properties.
No, I'm not talking about 7. Can I know who you are?
Oh, I'm just a normal person, and I was just wondering what you thought about it.
The story is very different between the two. WTC7 is still under investigation, so I'm not in a position to discuss it.
And were you hired specifically by Larry Silverstein to do an investigation?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So you have no opinion on World Trade Center 7 then?
No.
Like just from your expertise, you don't have an opinion on it, or?
I do not render a judgment until all of the analyses are done. Otherwise, what's the point of making analyses?
Well, I did read that Cheyenne Sunder from NIST did admit that there was free fall speed with World Trade Center 7. Like, is it possible to have free fall speed without some sort of mechanism to help it fall? Sir?
I'm not exactly sure about what he said. Without reviewing the transcript of his statement, I would not comment.
So are you still involved with Larry Silverstein in any capacity?
Yes.
Okay, so anything you say could possibly hurt his $1 billion settlement?
Sir, I think that is no longer an intelligent conversation, so let's call it a day.
Thank you very much, sir.
He wouldn't comment on it. And then there was another guy named Craig Baylor who was on 9/11, the towers in the Pentagon. He was a fire protection engineer. He wouldn't comment on World Trade Center 7 either.
Like, would you agree that it was wrong that they just took the debris and shipped it off?
Yeah, that was horrible.
Before there was any thorough investigation.
Totally horrible.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
why do you think they did
that's forensic data.
So basically,
should have been collected, and it wasn't.
So that's almost like getting rid of evidence, right?
It is getting rid of evidence. I mean,
Well, I guess, yeah, it is getting rid of evidence.
I don't think anybody was looking at it that way at the time. I can't say one way or the other, but it certainly, if I were a part of the FEMA investigation, I would have said this deal should be kept.
Do you agree, like, with the official explanation of World Trade Center 7 too? That the fire just caused it to just fall symmetrically like that? Just down, boom, all of a sudden it's gone?
I don't necessarily have an opinion about that.
Just from their not commenting on it, I know there's something definitely wrong with the official story of number 7. Even though I can't prove it, like I said, I just know that, just by looking at it, those things didn't come down because fire weakened the steel.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest problem I have with the demolition argument is that for every expert or professional that we can get that say they were brought down methodically and not naturally, the official story people will be able to find 2 to match. You know what I mean? So for every expert we have, like Chandler or Cole or Gage or any of those guys, Tony Zambodi, I thought he's pretty funny when he was talking about the chocolate chip cookie. But, yeah, they would always have experts on their side saying that it came down because fire weakened the steel. And the general public out there in North America or whatever have already been conditioned for almost 10 years now by watching those Discovery Channel documentaries that that's exactly why they came down, was because fire weakened the steel. So that's my only problem with the argument. I don't disrespect or dismiss the research into that. I just don't bother with it because I'm not a professional and I can't go and explain to people why it's impossible.
If you were on a jury, though, and you were presented scientific evidence from 2 different sides, you would ultimately be tasked with deciding who was right. So that's my argument to that. I'm going to go ahead and let Adam speak to that a little more. And then I think that's kind of a good lead-in to say that this isn't all there is, that there are other issues.
Right, there are lots of other issues, and there's stuff that just cannot be debunked by anyone, not even like Ronald Week of the JREF.
Yeah, but I'll go ahead and let Adam speak to that, and then if you want to get to some of those other issues, I'm perfectly fine with that.
Sure, okay, Adam.
Yeah, when it comes to this issue of how many experts we have, it's important to remember that we don't exactly know how many professionals in the world have actually looked at what NIST conclusions are.
Right.
It is a 10,000-page report, and I would say certainly most of the general public probably hasn't read the 10,000-page NIST report unless they were specifically investigating 9/11.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of how many experts there are, a lot of these people haven't spoken up and supported the controlled demolition theory, but then again, a lot of them haven't exactly, gone on TV or openly said, we support the official story, and by that standard, they haven't really given an opinion, and not stating your opinion isn't the same as supporting one side or the other. There's no petition of people saying, we support the official story.
And I add that it takes guts to speak about these things, too. So we don't
right, yeah. A lot of them would risk their careers if they spoke out. That's exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, go ahead, continue, Adam.
And some people have lost their careers. Stephen Jones and Kevin Ryan are good examples of that. This is a really touchy thing. It's not something that you can just get into, and there might not be some consequences to it.
Now, can you give us people, in case like they aren't familiar with Kevin Ryan? He worked for Underwriters Laboratory, and can you just give a little background on what happened with him, how he came out with 9/11?
Oh, well, yes, he was an employee at Environmental Health Laboratories, which is a subdivision of Underwriters Laboratories, and basically he looked at what NIST said. He was looking at their conclusions, and he saw problems with it, so he sent a letter to one of the chief investigators there, Dr. Frank Gale, just a letter asking him, about these problems, and I found problems here, what's wrong with this, can you explain this to me? And after he sent it, he then made the letter public. And after he made it public, he was fired within like a week of writing it.
So that should raise suspicions with people right there, that why would a guy get fired just for asking a simple question?
Right, and Kevin Ryan, there was nothing mischievous or anything with what he was doing. He was just sending a letter out to...
He wasn't being like anti-American, or he wasn't a communist or anything like that. He just had some simple questions that didn't make sense, and he just asked for some answers.
Right, and all he thought was going to happen was that he'd just get an answer. He said he thought Frank Gale would get back to him and say, oh, well, yeah, you raised some good points. We'll look into it. Or maybe he'd get a letter saying, well, this is why so-and-so happened, and this is how we came to this conclusion. He just thought he'd get an answer, and Frank Gale never responded to him.
Well, that's very fishy right there, if you ask me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I'll add this just to something that I wanted to say about the active thematic material. In terms of that study being refuted, I would say if any debunker really wanted to refute their findings, all they'd have to do is write their own peer-reviewed refutation of the paper. And of course, it's 2011 now, the paper came out in 2009, and no debunker has done that yet. And what's more, people, need a little bit more backing up for this. Stephen Jones and others, they have other peer-reviewed papers out that support what this paper talks about, and those papers haven't been refuted either by any peer-reviewed publications.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's 6 mainstream peer-reviewed papers they have. So, and a couple of those are actually refutations written in a civil engineering journal of the American Society of Civil Engineers.
And that's like as reputable as you can get in the scientific community.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and they're actually refuting a paper. There's one paper that was written by Bazant, that's basically saying that the top portion of the tower crushed the rest, and there's been 2 refutations of that paper in the same journal that he published in.
Is that what they call the pile driver theory or whatever?
Yeah. And one of those was Anders Bjorkman. He wrote a reply, they published it, they did write a conclusion to it, basically, answering him, but he has actually offered 10,000 euros if they can actually demonstrate what they're saying, on a smaller scale. So the money's out there if they want to take it, and I think that's the best rebuttal to their rebuttal that he could offer. Okay, peer-reviewed, fine, I did it, you did it, why don't you go ahead and prove it physically, prove it can happen, and I will pay you. And nobody's claimed the money yet. It's funny, James Randi offers that if you can disprove paranormal claims. The J-Reppers are all over it. So why does it not work the other way?
Well, another thing I also found funny concerning NIST was when I spoke with Mike Newman. He was the public relations spokesman for the NIST investigation of the WTC. And when I talked to him, I think it was either 2005 or 2006, he mentioned to me that, I don't know if he slipped or if it's just, I don't know, but I thought it was significant. He said,
there are lots of prevailing theories. We have the one that we proposed back in 2004, which, does see it as a structural failure based upon damage and subsequent fires. But we're trying to find the evidence to show that, and we don't want, even though.
You see how damaging that sounds.
Yeah, you're starting with your conclusion, basically.
Exactly, and you're looking for anything that can verify this conclusion that you've already came to without looking at the evidence, instead of letting the evidence lead you to your conclusion.
Yeah, that was certainly the case for Building 7, because what Cheyenne Sunder had basically, or what they said in their report, essentially, is that, quote, the challenge was to determine if a fire-induced floor system failure could occur in WTC-7 under an ordinary building concepts fire. So right there, they're admitting that that was the challenge to see if fire could cause buildings definitely to collapse.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But most people who just look at World Trade Center 7 falling down, just as Danny Jowenko did, you know, if they don't know it happened on September 11th, something that they totally left out of the 9/11 Commission report, by the way, is even mentioning World Trade Center 7. You know, anybody would just think it's a controlled demolition. Like Anthony Lawson made that great video a while back that I think is a classic video called "This Is an Orange."
Yeah, I mean,
but you talked to Jovinko. I'm sorry, Adam, but I was going to say you talked to Jovinko, which was interesting because you kind of debunked what debunkers were saying at the time too, which is that he, you know, recanted or wasn't sure about what he was looking at.
Right. He said absolutely not. It was a controlled demolition. Absolutely positive he was.
Yeah, he looked at the blueprints. He was aware that they were saying it was fire, and he had had some time to think about it at that point in time.
Yeah, it's very hard to look at it and not assume that, because if you don't know what you're looking at and you have nothing else to compare to, well then what do you have left? I mean, it exhibited all the characteristics of demolition, and, you know, as I've heard mentioned, all the characteristics really for all three buildings, you know, the fact that they fell symmetrically, straight down, with pulverized concrete and the steel structures totally destroyed. Basically all these characteristics have only occurred in demolition, all in the same setting. You know, people said no building exhibiting all these characteristics has ever not been a controlled demolition.
Well, how significant would you say it is that David Chandler got NIST to admit free falls of World Trade Center 7?
I'd say it's extremely significant because before they were saying that free fall couldn't happen because if we're falling in free fall, that means there's no structural supports below.
Now, as far as I understand it, they aren't saying it was free fall from start to finish. It was free fall for 2.25 seconds.
Well, what I would say is this. They have a three-stage, sort of a three-stage process in how they time the collapse. The way they timed it is they timed the fall of the upper 18 floors of the building, because that's kind of the portion that you can see in a lot of the videos. You know, no video kind of shows the entire collapse of the building, whether because it starts kind of later into the video or it's blocked by other buildings. But one video they used shows the upper 18 floors, and they timed the fall of that portion until it disappeared behind the buildings to see what the rate of fall was. And what they said...
So in a natural collapse, though, there can't be any free fall no matter what length of time.
No, in a natural collapse, things have to be occurring naturally, meaning you have to have parts breaking, steel buckling, you know, things have to be happening over, you know, a period. It has to gradually progress throughout the building. Nothing just happens all at once and goes. Yes?
Adam, if you could, go ahead and speak to the Delft building as an example of that.
Oh, yes. This is a really good thing for people to look at. It was in, I believe, 2008, or, yeah, I believe it was 2008 or 2007. There was a building out in the Netherlands called the Delft building. It was a 13-story building that was on fire for about 7 hours. And after 7 hours of burning, a portion of it did collapse. And in fact, it was sort of a top-down collapse like the towers were. I'd say it was about, maybe it started like 2/3 up, like the 1/3 came down on it. But what's interesting about this, you know, initially debunkers were saying, well, here's proof that fire can cause these kind of collapses, but it doesn't support them at all, because this top-down collapse took approximately 10 seconds. I mean, anybody can look at this video, time it for themselves, do what they want. It took about 10 seconds to collapse, but it was a 13-story building. Now, for the towers were each 110 floors tall, and they both collapsed in around 15 seconds. So, you know, and for Building 7, it was a 47-story building, and it collapsed in under 7 seconds.
Well, I know the J-Rappers like to include the penthouse, too, in the timing, but that really is...
That's not a good argument at all, because, first of all, I would like to point out that the penthouse collapse itself is problematic because well, first of all, you know, they seem to think that invalidates the theory that it was a demolition, you know, that a chunk fell first and then the rest went. But that's not any kind of argument at all, because the building, that was the only part that was falling at that point. There virtually nothing happened to the rest of the building when that happened, and that in itself seems to be proof that, you know, the collapse of the penthouse and the collapse of the actual building were two separate events. What's interesting is that others have spoken up about this, including even debunkers. One gentleman named Dr. Frank Greening, who has been a very prominent debunker for years, he wrote his own criticisms of the NIST report when they had their draft for public comment out. And he points out a lot of problems in the report, and one thing he talks about is collapse of column 79 and the East Penthouse. Because he points out that what NIST says in their report is that, using their own measurements, that for how fast the penthouse began to fall and what the vertical displacement of column 79 was at the roof level, according to NIST, what NIST is basically saying is that column 79 began to accelerate downwards at about, I think you said 4.6 meters per second squared, but it was accelerating. Now, that's incredible because that column 79 was still supported by at least 30 floors worth of supports. NIST is arguing that from floor 13 down failed, but it still had over 30 floors of supports still connected to it. And how it could begin to collapse that quickly with all that support is virtually impossible. It's almost as impossible as the building falling in free fall for that 2.25 seconds.
Right, so in order for it to have fell at free fall, there couldn't have been anything in its way. So that means every bit of support had to be removed before.
Yes, absolutely. But what I will mention about NIST's three-stage thing, essentially they're saying that in the beginning of the collapse, it was a fall rate less than free fall. The first part is makes it about I believe they said it was 1.75 seconds. Then in stage 2 is where the free fall begins. And then after the free fall, there's the rest of the collapse where they say it's an acceleration less than gravity. But what's interesting about these stages, if you look at the video and where they start their timing, see, they measured the upper 18 floors and said that if the building had fallen in free fall, it would have taken those upper 18 floors approximately 3.9 seconds to collapse. Their measurement showed that the upper 18 floors took 5.4 seconds to collapse. So they said the building took 40% longer to fall than in free fall because, 5.4 seconds is about 1.5 seconds longer than what the free fall would have been. But what you can do is, if you figure out where they started their timing and start clocking it, if they're saying it's 1.5 seconds longer, well, just go and see what happens in that first 1.5 seconds of where they start their timing. And I've done this. And what happens is really just the roof line begins to dip. The kink starts to form. It looks like the roof line moves down a little bit. But what you notice is that that's the center of the building. The perimeter hasn't fallen yet. And in particular, if you look in that 1.5 seconds, the northwest corner hasn't actually begun to fall yet. It's still at the same height it was originally at. The northwest corner actually doesn't begin to collapse until about 1.5 seconds into NIST timing. And, of course, by then, we're back to 3.9 seconds. So what that shows is that the west side of the building did fall in free fall.
Well, you don't have to convince me. I'm just, like I said, I'm just playing devil's advocate. But
this is
right. But I believe Chandler and those guys are absolutely right, and they're being absolutely honest. And NIST is the ones that are being crooked, and Gene Corley and, Van Romero and all those guys, Charlie Thornton, Najib Abood and all them. They're lying.
If they're not lying, they certainly are being willfully ignorant and...
Okay. Maybe that was too harsh of a word as lying. Maybe they really, really want to believe what they're saying, and they just can't come to terms and believe that it's not true. So
it's obviously a hard thing to accept. And, much like the thermite paper, if any debunkers wanted to debunk the fact that Building 7 fell in freefall, all they would have to do is do an experiment to show that freefall can occur in a natural collapse. And again, none of them have done that yet because it's not possible. There's no way you could have freefall in a natural collapse in a structure like that.
Like I said before, my only problem with the demolition argument is that it's a circular argument where you'll have experts on each side and they could just battle forever. It could just go on forever,
Well,
you want to talk about some of the other things, Jeff?
Well, I would like to, like you said, there are a lot of different aspects and there's a lot of different ways that show we were lied to about that day. And my favorite thing to bring up, which I've been bringing up lately to, mainstream media sources, first responders, etc., and I've been very well received with this information. One of the reasons is because I'm going off official documents, their own words, just like Ray McGovern questioned Rumsfeld with his own words. Well, we have an inquiry called the Joint Congressional Senate Inquiry into the events of September 11th. That's not the exact name of it, but it's pretty close. And you can get that inquiry, the official documents. You can order a hard copy. You can go to gpoaccess.gov and download a PDF of it. And right in their own documentation, the official documents prove that we were lied to about 9/11. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. 100% concrete, factually documented proof in reference to collusions with Saudi intelligence and a cover-up. The Saudi royals and Prince Bandar were funneling money to the terrorists. That's proven. That's proven that there was a cover-up. It's proven that there was a lack of air defense on 9/11, and it's proven that there was foreknowledge of these attacks occurring.
And I'd like to speak to that, and I agree, but we did cut off Adam, at least I did, and I do want to let him finish. You were talking about the circular argument. What were you going to say to that, Adam?
Oh, all I was going to say is, we're not necessarily, proving demolition here. What we can prove is that there are enough problems with the official reports, and, proving the reports themselves wrong isn't proof that there was demolition, admittedly. It just means we need to reinvestigate it. And in the new investigation, it needs this time to be, independent. It needs to be by people who can really look into this without any, agenda possibly, and we'll, go from there.
I totally understand that and agree with that, but what I'm saying is what could blow the doors wide open into a new investigation would be this collusion with the Saudi intelligence and all, like the foreknowledge, etc. The stuff that the Jersey girls and stuff have been talking about for years and years and years that no one's paid attention to.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say that that's really...
I think it can... Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I would say that's really all we need. I kind of think of, when we get the new investigation into 9/11, I think of it as sort of a series of multiple investigations, because if we can just get one aspect of 9/11 reinvestigated, I think that will lead to all of 9/11.
Exactly. It'll be like a domino effect.
Yeah, exactly. If one thing gets reinvestigated, then the whole thing needs to be investigated.
Mm-hmm. And then we could find out exactly what mechanism brought down the towers, whether it be thermite, whether it be whatever, We could also, like whether the planes were remote controls or all that kind of stuff, That can be looked at later on after we blow the door open. With
I would like to mention just one more thing before we get off the topic of demolition and into something else, just to kind of address one thing about what debunkers say with the towers. They make all kind of claims like, well, how could they rig the buildings, and, well, doesn't it not look like a demolition? And I would say, from what I've looked into, I've kind of figured out what could be a good scenario for how the buildings were demolished in terms of how the collapses were initiated and in terms of what parts of the buildings were attacked to get them to fall. I don't say this is definitely how it happened, but it's one way it could have happened, and it's consistent with what we see in the videos. Part of it comes from a paper that Jim Hoffman wrote called A Hypothetical Blasting Scenario, where he outlines how thermite could have been used to initiate the collapse. Because his big thing is, you wouldn't use explosives to initiate the collapse. You know, you have to use something that's going to get the upper sections to start moving before the actual explosives go off, because if you use explosives right away, it kind of gives away it gives the game away. So, he believes that, and I believe this too, that thermite was used in some way on the steelwork in the buildings to cause the inward bowing that we see in the videos to disconnect the upper sections and get them to fall. And after that happens, you know, then the explosives are set off. And what I believe happened, what was attacked, if you look in a lot of the videos, debunkers always point out that that sections of the cores survived, which they think supports a pancake collapse, that the floors just collapsed around the cores and fell to the ground, and then the cores fell. What most people don't understand is that particularly the core of the South Tower, people point to this a lot. That's actually something that was mentioned in a lot of those Discovery Channel pieces that you talked about. Mm-hmm. There was a photograph taken by a gentleman named Aman Zafar, and he got a picture of the South Tower before it collapsed, and he got pictures, as it collapsed, and he actually got a picture of the core and analyzations of the picture that were done by a guy named, I believe his name is Mohammed Colombo, and also by mechanical engineer Gordon Ross. If you look at the core of the South Tower that was left standing, what they show is that it was too thin, too narrow to be the whole core, because the core of each tower actually consisted of outer core columns and inner core columns. There were 24 outer core columns, and there were 23 inner core columns. The outer core columns would have been very significant because they would have been the core columns the floors were directly connected to. And what their analyzation shows, because the core of the South Tower was too thin, then what we see is that even though the whole core didn't collapse, what did collapse was all of the outer core columns. The outer core columns were missing. And what has been suggested, and I know that mechanical engineer Tony Stambodi has talked about this too, if you go from that, and that would have been the case for the core of the North Tower too, that appears to be the case also, that the only thing that was standing were the 23 inner core columns. One of the ways you could repeat the demolition of the towers each time and have it consistent with how we saw them collapse is to take out the outer core columns and also the corner perimeter columns. The corner perimeter columns are the ones that gave the towers three-dimensional stability and connected the four walls together, because if you do that, then it's going to cause the floors to collapse and cause the perimeter walls to just peel out. And if you look in the videos, that's exactly what happened. The interior fails and the walls peel out. So what I think is the two main areas that were attacked in terms of actually demolishing the towers were the outer core columns and the corner perimeter columns. And if those two areas are attacked, it would account for what we see in the videos and how the buildings could have been demolished. If you take out the outer core columns, it destroys the building's internal stability, and you take out the corner perimeter columns, it destroys the outer stability, and that's all you need to do to get the buildings to collapse.
Well, another thing I find interesting about the collapse, I won't say the collapses because I don't like the word collapse because they didn't collapse. they blew up.
Right.
To me, they blew up anyway. I don't know. That's what I see when I look at them. But I find it very odd that the FEMA investigation and the NIST investigation were on totally opposite ends of the spectrum from each other. Whereas one saying that the trusses pulled the core, and then the other investigation said the total opposite of that.
Right. Well, yeah, that was the initial assumption that the trusses had failed, and that caused the upper sections to start to fall. What NIST is saying basically is the exact opposite, that the reason they collapsed is because the trusses didn't fail. The fact that they stayed connected is what really made the buildings collapse. But what's really interesting is that the reason they abandoned this theory, which really was the pancake theory, is that that's essentially what they're saying happened with Building 7 now. They're saying that floor 13 failing initiated the collapse, that floor 13 in Building 7 failed, and it fell on to floor 12 and then, to 11 and so on. They said they abandoned the pancake theory for the collapse of the towers because they didn't see any evidence of it in the videos or the photographs. And I would say, well, what evidence do they have that, this pancaking happened in Building 7? They don't have any. They're going off what they believe could have happened, and I don't believe they have any proof that this is actually what happened in Building 7.
It's so convoluted in lies and deceptions that it boggles the mind. Unfortunately, an issue like this, and again, not taking away from the relevance of it, but, your average 9/11 truther black t-shirt wearing guy or girl out there handing out DVDs on the sidewalk would not be able to address this issue. The best they would, I think, be able to do is say, "Oh, Bush blew up the towers. 9/11's an inside job. Bush blew them up. Found thermite in them." See, that's the problem. Yeah, that's what turns off a lot of people, especially like first responders, etc., when they hear that kind of stuff.
Certain people can speak to certain things better than others. I think that all of these issues are relevant, and all of them have the power to.
Oh, and I say, yeah, exactly. I'm not arguing with you. I totally agree.
No, and I'm not arguing with you because there are other things that can be brought up. I mean, you had mentioned the Jersey Girls. I mean, Patty Casaza is one of the Jersey Girls, and in 2007, she said that, quote, "The government knew the exact day, the type of attacks, and the targets, and that she was told this by whistleblowers." Mm-hmm. Now, debunkers have tried to say that, some con man told her this, trying to, cast doubt on what she's saying.
Right.
Well, she was working with bona fide whistleblowers. It's an insult to her intelligence to say that she wouldn't know the difference, and why would somebody tell a grieving widow this type of thing?
Right.
But beyond that, there is plenty of evidence to back up what she's saying.
Well, exactly. The evidence is found in those official documents.
It's there, and it's lots of other places. David Shippers, he was the chief investigative counsel for the U.S. House Judiciary Committee that prosecuted Clinton. And he stated that at the behest of several FBI agents, he had attempted to contact John Ashcroft, who was the U.S. Attorney General at the time. He had told them that there was, upcoming attacks.
A lot of people got warnings not to fly.
Yeah, I mean, he basically said there was very specific information that he's trying to relay to them, and that even though he was supposed to be in Republican circles and should be somebody that was listened to, he wasn't listened to. And then, you look at the books, The War on Freedom and The War on Truth by Nafeez Ahmed. Now,
amazing researcher, that guy. Everybody should be familiar with Nafeez Ahmed. Thank you for saying that name.
No problem. He personally corresponded with Shippers. So he talked to the man. They had conversations. And in the book, he sums up the case that Shippers brought forward. And he says, quote, "According to Shippers, these agents knew months before the 11 September attacks the names of the hijackers, the targets of their attacks, and the proposed dates, sources of their funding, along with other information." So, debunkers like to say that we only have, we have prior knowledge, but it's all not very specific. Well, that's very specific, and it backs up what Patty Casaza is saying. Mm-hmm. You have two different sources here saying the same thing. So if she was talking to a con man, well, You can say that all day long. You have no proof of it, and other evidence proves that there was that type of information going around. So she's not saying anything new, really. She's just backing it up. I mean, when that information came out, they acted like, why didn't she bring this up earlier? And this is like the golden gem of what they're looking for, and now she's just bringing it up. But it was nothing new. There was that type of information floating around, and there are reports that back her up, and they're talking about the same type of people. They're talking about people within the FBI, whistleblowers.
Oh yeah, and there was foreknowledge of these attacks as early as 1995 or 1998, where they knew that this was going to be happening.
Yeah, and I mean, there's all kinds of general information, but this is specific information talking about the proposed dates. I mean, she wasn't the first person to bring that up. It's been brought up before. And she's talking about FBI people, and Shippers was talking about FBI people that knew these things. So, both of these they corroborate each other. It's eyewitness testimony of things they were told. It's not direct testimony. It's not like we're talking to the actual agents, but that's the thing she said when she brought this up, is that those people were not willing to go forward for fear of retribution. Right. They wanted to be subpoenaed by the commission, and they were not.
Well, yeah, and that's another problem is a lot of the testimony has been classified. Like, say, take the naval aide that was asking Dick Cheney if the orders still stand.
Okay, Jeff. The 9/11 Commission report is the authoritative narrative on the events surrounding 9/11. I have nothing further to add. Do you have any more questions for me, Jeff?
If he would have answered my question when I talked to him, as what were those orders? He could have been put in jail for divulging classified information, so it's not his fault.
That's exactly, I'm sorry, but that's exactly the same thing she was saying. She's saying the reason you're not hearing this is from the horse's mouth is because they fear for their freedom, they fear for their jobs, and the only way they're going to do it is if they're asked to do it by an investigative body. And that, she said that, and then Shipper said that. So for the debunkers to poo-poo what she said, they're ignoring other information which backs up what she says.
Right, exactly.
Besides all the other facts, besides the fact that you're insulting her intelligence, that you're saying that somebody was lying to a grieving widow about something like that, put all that out the window. We have corroborating evidence that says the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's beyond me how they can do that, how they can just brush it aside. And that's something, like you were saying, Jeff, that anybody can bring forward. Mm-hmm. Here's what David Shipper said. Here's what Patty Casasa said, and it was not properly investigated. End of story.
Oh yeah, and even like Ellen Kagan, when the victims' family members had a lawsuit against the Saudi royals and Prince Bandar for funneling money to the terrorists, Ellen Kagan threw that case out. Who is now a Supreme Court justice, the newest Supreme Court justice that just was put in there by Obama.
The next identical question involves a lawsuit brought by the survivors of the victims of 9/11. And there the Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit said that the foreign immunity statute, which excluded tortious conduct like flying a plane into a building, did not apply. Congress had spoken that a country like Saudi Arabia should be liable for this kind of tortious conduct. And the Second Circuit said no, because the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia had not been placed on the terrorist list. Well, had nothing to do with the statute. Then, as Solicitor General, you said that the Second Circuit was wrong, but the Supreme Court ought not to hear the case because the conduct by the Saudis was outside the country, but the impact was inside the country. And the question is, would you think that case ought to have been heard by the Supreme Court? As a justice, would you vote to take that kind of a case?
Senator Spector, the government did argue, based on very extensive consultations, that the Supreme Court ought not to take that case, and that continues to be the government's position. I don't think it would be right for me to undermine the position that we took in that way by suggesting that it was wrong. It was, in fact, a position of the United States government in line with the interests of the United States government that I authorized and that I thought was appropriate for a number of reasons, which I'm happy to talk about with you. But I can say, I mean, I've not said with respect to any of. I think that the decisions that I made as Solicitor General on behalf of the United States government as my client are ones that I can't undermine in this hearing room.
Ms. Kagan, candidly, I don't think that is any reason not to respond to my question, but I'm going to move on.
Yeah, and Jim D. 3100, I didn't get a chance to listen to the interview that you did with him, but I'm pretty sure he probably brought up a fact which I've seen him bring up a lot of time, which is, yes, we've all heard that the hijackers lived with an FBI informant.
Right.
But it's deeper than that. That's not where the story ends.
The informant's handler, when he testified behind closed doors, according to news reports, he testified to Saudi Arabian money, but his testimony was classified. So Eleanor Hill, according to news articles, detailed his statements in a memo and sent it to the Department of Justice. Eleanor Hill, the executive director of the Senate and Congress Joint Inquiry, after Butler testified, Butler was his name, the agent's name, she detailed his statements in a memo because it was quite alarming what he was saying according to news reports. And what they were saying was he was following money from Saudi Arabia into the hands of the hijackers, and he told his superiors, and his superiors did nothing and ignored his warnings. His superior, again, was Louis Freeh. This money was coming from Louis Freeh's future client, Chris Bandar. I asked for MDR, that memo, mandatory declassification review, and they came back and said that they couldn't find it. They'd take another look if I could provide them more information. I mean, I made it pretty clear. I told them it was the memorandum of the committee from the Senate Joint Inquiry concerning testimony from Stephen Butler on October 9, 2002. Should be pretty easy to find. It's classified. I couldn't find it. So I called up Eleanor Hill to ask her, what else can I tell him to help him find his memo. She suggested I contact the Senate Intelligence Committee because they should have a copy of everything there. But I just told her, I thanked her. I thought she did a great job on that. As the executive director of that committee, she did a real good job because they put out a lot of information. People really should read it. There's a lot of very interesting stuff that came out during that investigation. So that's why they had an element commission, because of all the stuff they were finding. This needed to be explained.
So you thanked her because, she did do a good job.
Yeah. But when the report came out, that's when Bush censored 28 pages of it. And Bob Graham was one of the committee chairmen. And he wasn't happy about that. He wanted to get the information out. And when I talked to Eleanor Hill, I said, look, I'm just going to be blunt. I've read news reports, and I've read your report, and FBI reports, from the Pentagon investigation, and it looks to me like there was Saudi money going to intelligence agents, because that's what it says in the report. I think that what is in Butler's testimony, I think he was testifying to money from probably Bandar. And she said, I can't tell you anything that's classified, but did you read Bob Graham's books? I said, yeah, I read it, Intelligence Matters. And she said he was very upset that this stuff was being classified. He thought the American people should know it. But Bob Graham, he made it pretty clear what he was not supposed to say. He made it pretty clear it was money coming from Saudi Arabia, government officials in Saudi Arabia, and he even said that there was a conspiracy between two governments. And then he said he was going to run for president, because if he runs for president and wins, then that's going to get declassified. Well, he didn't run for president very long. Remember, he dropped out real quick. Okay, so here's the question I would like a debunker to answer is the informant that was housing the hijackers said that he would not testify because he refused to cooperate in the investigation. He said he won't testify unless he's subpoenaed and even at the end, he won't say nothing without full immunity. And then Bush stepped in and said, you're not going to talk to him at all anyway.
Here's $100,000.
He was paid $100,000. And that's in the Department of Justice OIG report. It's footnote number 197, I think. It's right there. In July of 2003, the asset was given $100,000 and closed an asset. $100,000 reward for not cooperating and helping the hijackers? So, why? Who paid him $100,000? That's tax money? Why did we pay the informant who was helping the hijackers to refuse to testify without full immunity? Why are we paying him $100,000? That looks like a reward. Looks like a reward when George Tenet gets the Medal of Freedom. When he gets the highest award he can get from the president, looks like an award. Why would the head of the CIA get rewarded after 9/11 and, the bogus information to get us in a war in Iraq?
He would not testify. He refused to testify, and Bush supported him in this notion, right, Jeff? I mean, and then they paid him $100,000.
And they even gave him $100,000 for
Right. And can you elaborate on that, Jeff? I mean, why did they say they gave him $100,000? What was that for?
I don't know. I don't know. Just for something to do, I guess. I don't know. Hey, here's $100,000.
But that's the facts. I mean, he was paid. He did refuse to testify, and Bush supported him in one way or another in that endeavor to not.
Mm-hmm. And he did. And he knew he had terrorists living with him. So he knew what was going on.
Wouldn't we like to know why? Like, wouldn't we like to know his story?
Would love
Nothing to be heard there.
Unfortunately, the FBI lost the memo that Eleanor Hill wrote down during his talks. So we'll never know unless he wanted to talk, because the FBI can't find that memo.
And then you look at NORAD. We started to talk about NORAD. I mean, start from the beginning.
Well, that's just before. Yeah, exactly. There's all these different aspects, and like say like a structural engineer was to look at 9/11, the demolitions might make him go, Say a military person or something were to look at the story of 9/11, and they found out about this whole lack of air defense on that day from, NORAD, etc., which is a biggie.
Yeah. What was one of their main excuses? I mean, the 9/11 Commission said, with its transponder off, it is possible, though more difficult, to track an aircraft by its primary radar returns, but unlike transponder data, primary radar returns do not show the aircraft's identity and altitude.
Or you got your popular mechanics. Popular mechanics excuses is that they were, NORAD was set up to look outward, not inward. So whatever.
Right. And I believe that's true to an extent. But as you showed when you talked to the NORAD historian, they can look anywhere they're asked to look. All they have to be is asked. That's it.
Notified, exactly. And there was no...
The Payne Stewart incident proves that can happen. It did happen in that instance.
Yes,
now,
and there's been lots of...
Debunkers say that was a 70-minute intercept, right? When you're comparing a Cessna compared to the events of 9/11, one Cessna that's off course, it's different. I mean, for instance, on Mike Williams' page on 911myth.com, he provides two examples of other intercepts for comparison. And he couldn't find the information to draw firm conclusions on either one of those. So he should know that finding any detailed statistics on this is difficult. I believe there are statistics that would prove that there are intercepts that take place much quicker than that. But let me back up a little bit. With the Payne Stewart incident, you're talking about a 70-plus minute intercept time. But you're talking about a Cessna. It's not a hijacking. Like, at the time that this happened on 9/11, you've already had, two planes strike the World Trade Center, and then you have, 45 minutes or so for Flight 77 to strike the Pentagon.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, this should be on the highest alert. It's a totally different situation. You don't just have a Cessna that they're aware of where it's at. It's not hijacked. It's not over highly populated areas.
And you don't get anywhere close to the Pentagon, the most secure airspace in the world, no matter what anybody says. that it wasn't or whatever, or that there were no fighters at Andrews Air Force Base, because there was. It's ridiculous. There is such a cover-up.
Like, on Mike Williams' old webpage from 911myths.com, he states that, to be fair, if the fighters had been closer as they were on 9/11, then the response time would have been better. But his new page on the subject, it no longer contains that line. So much for being fair. You know, it's no longer there. And, you know, and I've said, regardless, using a 76-minute starting point for a refutation is fine, because these events are barely comparable. And as I was alluding to, and this is more concise, I think, Stewart was flying a 6 to 8 passenger Learjet 35. He was not flying a commercial airliner. It was not flying over densely populated areas. It did not have its transponder turned off, and it was on autopilot, as opposed to having terrorists at the helm clearly attacking the country. So then we look at the Pentagon, right? The plane that hit the Pentagon, it took off at 9:38 a.m. That's 44 minutes after Flight 77 veered off course. And that's a conservative figure. There's people that put the figure higher. Now, you got to understand, the FAA had already received 52 pre-9/11 warnings by that time, you know? And these mentioned Al-Qaeda, that they would want to conduct hijackings. They warned airports in 2001 that the intent of the hijacker is not to exchange hostages for prisoners, but to commit suicide in a spectacular explosion. So the very moment that Flight 77 deviated from its course, it should have been a target for interception right away. There's no question. You know, we were at war, and we were at war after the first strike. Debunkers like to say that, you know, they weren't sure after the first strike what was going on.
Oh, wow. I'd just like to speak on that point real quick here. In George Bush's new book, Decision Points, he writes in there on page 142, around 8 a.m. I received Presidential Daily Briefing, the PDB, which combined highly classified intelligence with in-depth analysis of geopolitics. The September 11th briefing, delivered by a bright CIA analyst named Mike Morrell, covered Russia, China, and the Palestinian uprising in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. Now check this out. Shortly after the PDB, we left for a visit to Emma E. Booker Elementary School to highlight education reform. On a short walk from the motorcade to the classroom, Karl Rove mentioned that an airplane had crashed into the World Trade Center. That sounded strange. I envisioned a little propeller plane horribly lost. Then Condi called. I spoke to her from a secure phone in the classroom that had been converted into a communications center for the traveling White House staff. She told me that a plane had struck the World Trade Center tower, and it wasn't a light aircraft, it was a commercial jetliner. So, he knew before he walked into the classroom and read that book that it was a commercial jet airliner, when nobody supposedly knew, because when they were showing the videos on all the news channels, it was just a hole in the North Tower, and everybody was wondering what it was. So, here's the question. If Lieutenant Colonel Tony Crawford told National Security Advisor Condoleezza Rice, and Rice told President George W. Bush, who told Tony Crawford? Since at that time, supposedly, nobody knew it was a commercial jetliner. So who told Tony Crawford that it was a commercial jetliner? Who told Condoleezza Rice? Who told George Bush before he even went into the classroom to read his stupid book?
It's an interesting point. And, you know, I was saying, debunkers say, you know, they didn't know what was going on. But really, that's not exactly true. They probably do. They probably use this as an excuse. But the fact is, government officials would claim, you know, later that they thought the first strike was just an accident. But then we have counterterrorism czar Richard Clark, and in his 2004 book, Against All Enemies, he says that a member of his White House staff told him that until we know what this is, Dick, we should assume the worst. And then in Bob Woodward's 2000 book, Bush at War, it was reported that when CIA Director George Tenet learned of the first strike, he was told specifically that the World Trade Center has been attacked, after which he immediately suspected bin Laden. So after the first strike, they knew what was going on.
Well, what was in that August...
They should have known what was going on anyway.
In the August 6th memo, where Condoleezza Rice said at the commission hearings, the guy asked her, like, what was the title of the memo?
Thank you. Commissioner Benveniste.
Good morning, Dr. Rice.
Good morning.
Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you.
I want to ask you some questions about the August 6, 2001 PDB. We had been advised in writing by the CIA on March 19, 2004, that the August 6 PDB was prepared and self-generated by a CIA employee. The CIA clarified its version of events, saying that questions by the President prompted them to prepare the August 6 PDB. You have said to us that the President directed the CIA to prepare the August 6 PDB. The extraordinary high terrorist attack threat level in the summer of 2001 is well documented. And Richard Clarke's testimony about the possibility of an attack against the United States homeland was repeatedly discussed from May to August within the intelligence community, and that is well documented. You acknowledged that Richard Clarke told you that al-Qaeda cells were in the United States. Did you tell the President at any time prior to August 6 of the existence of al-Qaeda cells in the United States?
First, let me just make certain.
If you could just answer that question, first, because I only have a very limited...
I understand, Commissioner, but it's important that I also address... It's also important, Commissioner, that I address the other issues that you have raised. So I will do it quickly, but if you'll just give me a moment.
Well, my only question to you is whether you
I understand,
told
Commissioner,
the President...
but I will, if you'll just give me a moment, I will address fully the questions that you've asked. First of all, yes, the August 6th PDB was in response to questions of the President. There was no recommendation that we do something about this. The FBI was pursuing it. I really don't remember, Commissioner, whether I discussed this with the President.
Thank you.
Remember very well that the President was aware that there were issues inside the United States. He talked to people about this. But I don't remember the al-Qaeda cells as being something that we were told we needed to do something about.
Isn't it a fact, Dr. Rice, that the August 6 PDB warned against possible attacks in this country? And I ask you whether you recall the title of that PDB.
I believe the title was Bin Laden determined to attack inside the United States. Now, the PDB, no, Mr. Benveniste,
I will get into the...
I would like to finish my point here.
I didn't know there was a point.
You asked me whether or not it warned of attacks.
I asked you what the title was.
You said, did it not warn of attacks? It did not warn of attacks inside the United States. It was historical information based on old reporting. There was no new threat information, and it did not, in fact, warn of any coming attacks inside the United States.
Now, you knew by August 2001 of al-Qaeda involvement in the first World Trade Center bombing. Is that correct? You knew that in 1999, late 99, in the Millennium Threat period, that we had thwarted an al-Qaeda attempt to blow up Los Angeles International Airport and thwarted cells operating in Brooklyn, New York, and Boston, Massachusetts. As of the August 6th briefing, you learned that al-Qaeda members have resided or traveled to the United States for years and maintained a support system in the United States. And you learned that FBI information since the 1998 blind shake warning of hijackings to free the blind shake indicated a pattern of suspicious activity in the country up until August 6th, consistent with preparation for hijackings. Isn't that so?
Do you have other questions that you want me to answer as part of the sequence?
Did you not? You have indicated here that this was some historical document. And I am asking you whether it is not the case that you learned in the PDB memo of August 6th that the FBI was saying it had information suggesting that preparations, not historically, but ongoing, along with these numerous full-field investigations against al-Qaeda cells, that preparations were being made consistent with hijackings within the United States.
What the August 6th PDB said, and perhaps I should read it to you.
We would be happy to have it declassified in full at this time, including its title.
I believe, Mr. Benveniste, that you've had access to this PDB.
But we have not had it declassified so that it can be shown publicly, you know.
I believe you've had access to this PDB, exceptional access. But let me address your question.
Nor could we, prior to today, reveal the title of that PDB.
May I address the question, sir? Commissioner, this was not a warning. This was a historical memo prepared by the agency because the President was asking questions about what we knew about the inside. Now,
well, if you were willing to declassify that document, then others can make up their minds about it. The President was in Crawford, Texas at the time he received the PDB. You were not with him, correct?
That's correct.
Now, was the President, in words or substance, alarmed in any way or motivated to take any action, such as meeting with the Director of the FBI, meeting with the Attorney General, as a result of receiving the information contained in the PDB?
The President was told this is historical information. I'm told he was told this is historical information, and there was nothing actionable in this. The President knew that the FBI was pursuing this issue. The President knew that the Director of Central Intelligence was pursuing this issue, and there was no new threat information in this document to pursue.
Did the President meet with the Director of the FBI between August 6th and September 11th?
I will have to get back to you on that. I'm not certain.
It was called Project Bojinka, where they had plans to attack places using commercial airliners as weapons.
They had quite a bit of evidence and warning ahead of time, forewarnings and also, previous knowledge of an attack that was imminent, the rough timing of the attack, that it would be attacked within the United States, and Bush knew that certainly by August 6th when the report was headed that Osama planned an imminent attack within the United States, and what sort of an attack it would be, what weapons would be used, planes used as weapons, and what some of the targets would be. And they knew this by 1996 in part because Ramzi Yousef's computer was captured in the Philippines with the Bojinka plan on it, which included using planes as weapons. And he's one of the people that thought up some of the ideas of how to plant bombs on planes that would knock them out of the air or do various types of, things with using planes as weapons. So, he's one of the plotters of this kind of an attack. And he was imprisoned afterwards, but he was not captured in the Philippines, but one of his explosive laboratories blew up, and they retrieved a computer there, and the Philippine police passed the information on to the U.S. back in '96. The targets were listed as the Twin Towers, I think the Sears Tower in Chicago, also the Pentagon, the CIA, the Capitol, the White House, and points in D.C. And they took it seriously at the time, and they did things about it. And the attempt on the Twin Towers in '93 was followed up for many years by an FBI agent, John O'Neill, who was eventually chased out of the FBI unjustly by elements of the Radical Terrorism Unit and took a job at security at the Trade Towers and died there. But he followed many of these same characters who came into the country back in the 90s and were at this mosque in New Jersey up into the current period and the prior to 9/11 period and tried to warn people.
So yeah, they knew of those type of attacks. I mean, before any of the specific information started to pour in, they should have known. As soon as a plane hit the World Trade Center, that should have been something that was already on their minds.
Oh, but you know what the excuse was when John Judge was at the commission hearings and he asked one of the guys why there was no response.
When I was at this Joint Intelligence Committee press conference, I got to ask Shelby a question because they didn't know I was in press, and I raised my hand, and I told them I was from 9/11 Citizens Watch, and I started saying, Condoleezza Rice said,
I don't think anybody could have predicted that they would try to use an airplane as a missile, a hijacked airplane as a missile?
And he started grinning and nodding his head. And I said, now, did your investigation find that there were plans by these groups to use planes as weapons, or that these groups had used planes as weapons? Because I knew they had. And a plot against the Eiffel Tower was foiled. There was one with the Chechens tied to these circles that went in, attacked an apartment building in Moscow. And so he said, yes, we found numerous instances of planes being used as weapons or plans to use planes as weapons. And I said, well, then, did your investigation show that preparations were made here in the United States in response to that information? He sort of blanched. He stepped back. He mumbled something. I thought he said, I can't get into that, and he walked away from the podium. Graham jumped up in front of the podium. He took the next question. I saw Shelby at the back in a quick, heated discussion with some guy back there. Shelby came back up, stood behind Graham. When Graham finished the question, Shelby came up to the microphone again, pointed to me, and said, and in answer to your question on advice of counsel, my answer is no. Well, I was so shocked that he said this, I didn't ask the follow-up question, which is obvious. Why not? Well, America needs to ask that question. They knew what was coming. Did they not prepare at all? I, in fact, know, though, that answer was even more disingenuous because they did prepare.
Even when Philip Zelikow said,
the protocols in place on 9/11 for the FAA and NORAD to respond to a hijacking presumed that, 1, the hijacked aircraft would be readily identifiable and would not attempt to disappear. 2, there would be time to address the problem through the appropriate FAA and NORAD chains of command. And 3, the hijacking would take the traditional form, not a suicide hijacking designed to convert the aircraft into a guided missile. On the morning of 9/11, the existing protocol was unsuited in every respect for what was about to happen. What ensued was the hurried attempt to create an improvised defense by officials who had never encountered or trained against the situation they faced.
Who was it? Was it Peter Jennings that did the report where he said,
we're going to take a closer look tonight at another example of where, despite the conventional wisdom, there were people in the United States who actually were preparing to defend against the kind of attacks which occurred here on 9/11. The North American Aerospace Defense Command, NORAD for short, has been defending the skies over the U.S. and Canada for almost 50 years, 46 to be precise. USA Today reports that in the 2 years before the attacks on September the 11th, NORAD conducted exercises using hijacked airliners as weapons. And one target was the World Trade Center.
We knew he hated us. But there was nobody in our government, at least, and I don't think the prior government that could envision flying airplanes into buildings on such a massive scale.
I don't think anybody could have predicted that they would try to use an airplane as a missile, a hijacked airplane as a missile.
But that turns out not to be true. U.S. military planners did envision and practice those very scenarios. As reported by USA Today, the North American Aerospace Defense Command, NORAD, conducted exercises with fighter jets, simulating hijacked planes flown into the World Trade Center in the 2 years before the attack. Pentagon planners also envisioned the attack on the Pentagon 5 months before it happened.
In 1999, I was organizing a demonstration against Pentagon funding and the budget called A Day Without the Pentagon. I wasn't imagining what the attackers imagined, but just take a day of the Pentagon's budget, put it back in the civilian world. And in the course of doing that, I had to meet with and get a tour through the building by the head of security, Colonel Robinson. I don't think he's any longer there after 9/11, but he was there 30 years at the time, a black colonel, head of security for the whole building. He took me through the Joint Chiefs offices out onto a parade ground and a parking lot at the end of the steps that went to the parade ground and a retaining wall. And he said, you can't come up. That was where we were going to end up. And he said, you can't come beyond this retaining wall. And I said, there's a Supreme Court decision in the 70s says we can come up to the steps. And he said, no, not now. We're on Delta Alert. I said, what's Delta Alert? He said, it's our highest form of security alert, Alpha, Beta, Charlie, Delta. This is 99. I said, why are you on your highest form of security alert? He said, we get bomb threats every day from Muslims. Then he turned and pointed to the roof of the building. We were standing outside the Pentagon. And he said, and we have camera and radar up there so they don't try to run a plane into the building.
He actually said that?
That is what he said to me in 1999. And my mouth opened and I said, I thought the guy was looped. Because I know that this is the most restricted airspace on Earth since the 1950s. No plane comes in here that's not a commercial or military flight whose path and identity and veracity they already know. No plane comes in, even if it has all that. If it doesn't have its transponder on, it's going to get dealt with by a separate, not FAA NORAD, but by a separate response capacity that goes into action 50 miles from D.C. There's an air defense identification zone circle. 50 miles out, there's a special radar and command center. In those days, for the Secret Service and the military commands and FAA out at Langley, Virginia, near the CIA. And that picks up the planes coming in and identifies them. It knows what routes they're supposed to take, and it tracks them in.
So there's something to what Norman
that isn't known is considered a bogey. They have immediate scramble response capability. 113th Air National Guard out of Anacostia Naval Air Station, right near the Pentagon. They also have planes that are on scramble ready at Andrews Air Force Base. And any plane in the air or even on the ground can be scrambled for such an emergency. But they have designated F-15s and interceptors. And I grew up here. I have seen those things out in Virginia and in D.C. go up in the air before they get anywhere near the key points and intercept those planes and chase them out. Inside that 50-mile zone is an inner circle called P-56. And that's the totally restricted airspace for anything that they don't want in there. And P-56 is a 17-mile circle around the Washington Monument. It includes the Pentagon. And then within P-56, there are even more designated areas that are, completely restricted to anything. And those include the mall area, the Capitol buildings, and Senate and Congress. That's P-56A, and the White House. And another, that's like this long rectangle, and another little circular area up north where the Vice President has his house, is P-56B. So this is all well monitored and restricted unless they let their guard down, which it was clear to me they did when the Piper Cub nearly flew into the White House bedroom during the Carter years. During the Clinton years. And Clinton was not there. But that morning they announced that a plane had landed and crashed on the White House lawn very near the facility. It had hit a tree branch with a strut and crashed and nosedived just before it went into the bedroom level at the White House. And they said that the pilot was dead. They didn't know his identity. They said not to worry. The Clintons are safe. They're not here. It was being renovated. And they're over at the Blair House. I said that morning, it's a good thing there's no real terrorists. You don't know who attacked, you don't know his identity, you don't know if he had associates, and you're telling them that you missed him and this is where he really is?
Yeah, because when I talked to that NORAD historian at Cheyenne Mountain, he mentioned the Payne Stewart plane as one of the examples of how they could intercept within the boundaries of America.
Of course they can intercept, and in fact, they in their own magazines brag about searching for planes that are lost to the FAA radar because they're on the military radars, which are complete. They're not. When they set up the early civilian air patrol, before they had the radars, they just had eyeballs. That was across the country. And they had in the 50s stand downs of all planes out of the sky. They had an exercise that brought every plane down, like happened on 9/11. And they have radars that cover all the spaces. I mean, why wouldn't you? You're going to only track something till it gets to your border, and then after that you're defenseless. It makes no sense for them to make this claim that they had 180-degree rather than 360-degree radars that only pointed outward toward Russia, and they didn't look anywhere else. They were always looking, and they were always scrambling. And that scramble capability, which is a combination of FAA, NORAD, and the Military Command Center, was in use for years and years. It scrambled when the Soviets came down the coastline, and it scrambled when there were air emergencies. Any transponder goes off, any plane stops communicating with tower, communicates but fails to respond to tower commands to change course or elevate, or goes off course for more than, or combinations of those, for more than 2 or 3 minutes constitutes an air emergency. The first air emergency was noted and responded to at 8:14 on the morning of 9/11, when the earliest flight, I believe it was 11, went off course, and they began to try to contact it. And then shortly after that, the transponder went off. But they didn't lose it. They just tagged it because it's very easy to see. If you go to the primary screen, all of them are just radar dots. If you go to the tag screen, then each one has an identifying tag from its transponder that tells them its identity and also its airspeed and its altitude. And it also serves, when they have it on, as a local radar for the plane itself, for what's in its vicinity. When a transponder goes off, they merely have to switch back and forth from the primary to the tag screen, and they will see the one dot that doesn't have a tag. It's very evident, and that becomes the bogey, but they tagged it as Flight 11. They hadn't lost it for that long. They knew what it was, but they were no longer getting altitude or airspeed on it, but they were tracking it. They could certainly see the plane. The transponder just gives them more information. So they didn't lose any of these planes. The Flight 77 was not lost. It was picked up by Indiana Tower minutes after it turned around and headed back east. They were looking for it for 2 or 3 minutes going west, but then they realized that it changed course, and the Indiana Tower picked it back up and guided it all the way into the DC Tower, tracked it at least. So none of these planes were lost. They had time, Colonel Everhart testified under oath, to intercept every plane 67 times that year in normal air emergencies. The traffic controllers had notified their after 2 or 3 minutes trying to get through the plane, they'd notified the supervisor, flagged it, hand up. Supervisor come in, maybe spend a few more minutes straightening it out. If they neither could get anywhere, they'd put one guy on the plane. They'd have planes near try to contact it. Meanwhile, they immediately called the regional command center, identified an air emergency. They, in turn, had their military liaison call the National Military Command Center. They called Cheyenne Mountain. Cheyenne Mountain called the bases responsible within the needs sector. That would be the procedure, or whatever sector it's in. Right. And then those planes nearest it can go up. They go out to a staging point. Once they're activated, the traffic controllers know where the staging point is. They begin to clear a path in the commercial traffic, because these planes go 15 to 1,800 miles an hour. They can't just jump up into commercial traffic. They clear a commercial path while they're getting to their staging point that will allow them to shoot down that path and intercept with coordinates that they're given, called bogey dope, and intercept the plane 67 times that year.
Well, I remember listening to James Meggs from Popular Mechanics on Jack Blood's radio show, and he said went about that 67 times, he said, but not over the continental U.S. So
not over the continental U.S.
That's what he said, to make the excuse of why NORAD, they looked outward, not inward, kind of thing.
Well, he's just lying through his teeth. Of course they were over the continental U.S. And they were new. I mean, that's the point. If they're out in the ocean, they might still go up and try and help them. But I mean, it's more important that the plane's going to go down in a populated area. You get somebody up there. Mm-hmm. With lives at stake. But I mean, of course they were over the continental United States. and they went up and intercepted planes that were in trouble. And they have a protocol. It's a different protocol if they're hijacked. They don't engage as directly or as visibly, but they follow them. But in a normal air emergency, they go near them. They try to establish radio communication. They try to fly next to them and look in the cockpit, see if the people are unconscious, or if they wag their wings, and the planes are supposed to wag their wings, and then they follow them. They can sandwich them, top and bottom, and guide them down to where they want them to go. They can fire, flares out in front of them to wake them up. They have a procedure, and the procedure was followed, and it's timely response. And
So you think there's something to Norman Mineta's testimony where he was saying there was a guy telling Cheney, sir, the plane...
I sat there during that testimony. I saw him give it, and it was
did you?
important testimony. You know, and Mineta had been called into the White House Situation Room. He got there about, I think, 9:24 to 9:26, somewhere in that time, prior to the plane crashing into the Pentagon. And he said...
there was a young man who would come in and say to the vice president, the plane is 50 miles out. The plane is 30 miles out. And when it got down to the plane is 10 miles out, the young man also said to the vice president, do the orders still stand? And the vice president turned and whipped his neck around and said, of course the orders still stand. Have you heard anything to the contrary? Well, at the time I didn't know what all that meant. And
the flight you're referring to is the
flight that came into the Pentagon.
Yeah.
Hello? Hi, Mr. Cochran?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Jeffrey Hill. I'm glad I got a hold of you, sir. The reason I was calling you is because I was hoping you could help me out with a few questions I had for you.
Okay.
When you were in the emergency ops center with Cheney, and you asked him if the orders still stand, I was just wondering, like, what orders were you referring to?
Okay, I'm really not. I'm not prepared to talk about this subject at all.
Oh no?
No.
Oh.
Now, Mineta speculated to Benveniste, who was questioning him at the time, that was a shoot-down order that he was asking about. I don't see how it could be a shoot-down order. Number one, they don't have anything up to shoot it down with. Nothing from Andrews went up. Nothing from the Air National Guard, 113th Air Wing, went up. Nothing went up from Langley till well after the Pentagon was hit. Nothing that went up in D.C., or I was in New York from Otis, was down here, even though they knew from the chatter of all of the agencies, which opened at 8:24 that morning, and everybody, the Pentagon, CIA, NORAD, the Cheyenne Mountain, the FAA, and the pilots themselves were online with each other, and they knew that a plane, the pilots testified to this in one of the books, that a plane was headed toward D.C., one of the hijacked planes, which has to be 77. It's the only one that comes toward D.C. My local news 8 announced 20 minutes before I felt the shock of the hit on my window, the Pentagon's just across the river from me, that a plane was coming to D.C., and that had to be government information that was leaked out. And they knew it was coming, and they had tried to then turn and intercept that plane. They had time to get there from New York, those two pilots, and they were called back into New York airspace and told to stay there. So there was nothing up to shoot that plane down with. They could have put something up, but nobody did. So also, if you're talking about a shoot-down order, it would seem to me you're not talking about the distance of the plane from D.C. You're talking about the distance, or the bogey from D.C. You're talking about the distance between your interceptor and shooter to the plane. In other words, we're 10 miles from the target. Do we still shoot it down?
But in all likelihood...
But in this scenario, what does make sense is a stand-down order.
Exactly, that's what I was going to say, yeah.
And the 50 miles out, I believe, is the plane entering the 50-mile ADIZ of P-56. And as it gets deeper into P-56 and closer to P-56A, and the area around, the Congress and the White House, this aide is coming back saying it's 30 miles from us. It's 10 miles from us. Are we going to respond? And Cheney says...
Basically talking about at all those points of defense it's getting through.
Exactly. It's coming closer and closer. Aren't we going to put something up? And so the order that he's asking about, still standing, to me, has to be a stand-down order, not a shoot-down order. And there's a lot of conflicting accounts about whether Cheney approved a shoot-down order Peter L. Scott's written about them exhaustively, as well as some other writers. But, there's just not evidence that there was any real plan to shoot anything down.
Well, yeah, there was no shoot-down orders communicated to Needs until like 10:41 or something like that, after everything had taken place. Thanks to the phone calls from Flight 11, people were notified. Anybody in the truth movement that goes around saying that those phone calls were fake are just helping the official story. Why would they fake these phone calls and alert people to what's going on? The 9/11 truth movement that says the plane in Shanksville was shot down. Well, then you're just helping the government there again, right? Because you're saying that they did their job in defending the airspace, which they didn't. There's so much convolution in the truth movement compared to the facts and the evidence that we have, where a lot of people are just hurting these facts and the evidence that we've just talked about.
I hear you. Yeah. I don't know what to say right now.
But no, I don't mean to get all like hyper about it. It really, frustrates me that, I've been dealing with all these people on these forums lately and on Facebook, and they're really, I don't know what the word is, naive, foolish, deceived into believing a lot of the stuff they believe. I really wish that these people that really care about 9/11 truth would actually start to look at the facts instead of worrying about holding dear to the theories that they hold about these theories that they believe as facts, which are just their opinions based on lack of knowledge.
Yeah, and I think, again, I've said it, I think cognitive dissonance has a lot to do with it.
Like anybody that believes, a plane flew over the Pentagon and nobody saw it is really, 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 really deceived. I don't know, the word I'd want to use, but I'm not going to.
No, and, we talk about that on the blog a little bit too. I don't want to pick bones with anybody out there, really.
No, and I understand that, and I respect that.
But the thing is, let's make it real simple. How many of the witnesses that CIT says that the plane flew over, you've talked to them, Jeff?
CIT went to the Pentagon, or went to, Virginia, and they proved that a plane hit the Pentagon because they talked to people that saw it with their own eyes. It's just CIT leaves that detail out when they talk about their flyover theory. Oh, yeah, by the way, all our witnesses saw the plane hit with their own eyes.
Yeah, well, you've talked to them too, and yeah, exactly. And they told you to your, not your face, but to your ear, that they definitely saw the plane hit the building.
No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Exactly.
Yeah, you talked to one guy. How adamant was that one guy about, just how mad was he at them, and how sure was he that that's what he saw?
That plane followed Route 95, 395 actually, right into the Pentagon, just like it was following a AAA map. It was definitely an American Airlines plane. I knew it because I'd flown maybe 60 times the year before.
Yeah.
It was out of the flight path. I lived right there in Crystal City, overlooking the West Lot. I was on my balcony less than a quarter of a mile. I heard it bank. I heard the engines rev. I saw it hit. I felt, smelt, and tasted the explosion and lived with the aftermath for months afterwards. I promise you, it was a fucking plane and not a cruise missile or anything else.
Okay, I believe you.
And as one guy in California drove me crazy, I have pictures.
Oh my God! Did you talk to a guy named Craig Ranke?
Yes.
Oh my God!
I have pictures of the Pentagon, of the fireball, just as it's subsiding because I couldn't get my camera quick enough. And he wanted to see them. Mm-hmm. And I told him I couldn't find them. And I still haven't really looked for them, but I kind of know where they are. But what he doesn't understand is what he wants to see to validate or invalidate some stupid...
Well, he's the one that's going around saying that the plane flew north of the Citgo and flew over the Pentagon.
Yeah, I talked to him, and he said, well, I interviewed people who said they saw a gray plane. And I said, in what direction would they be looking from? And he said, well, they were north, or they were west of 395. And I said, okay. And I was east, and the sun was in my back. So they would have been looking into the sun. So when you look into the sun and you're looking at something silver, it looks fucking gray.
Yeah, well, yeah, that makes sense. Did you obviously must have told him the same thing you told me, or?
Oh, yeah. And he didn't really want to hear it.
Well, because it doesn't fit his theory.
Exactly.
And he usually puts out all the his interviews out on the internet.
Yep.
But obviously he just cherry picks the ones that would kind of maybe sort of fit his theory after he's...
Well, mine's not on there except the statement to say that they've never been able to track me down.
What?
Go on his website and look for anything from me.
And they say that...
I even posted in their discussion board, and he removed it.
Really?
Hmm?
That's, how interesting that is. So you didn't have a problem with him recording you and telling your story to the world kind of deal?
I was actually out in California, and I was going to meet with him for an afternoon, and with his cameraman and just sit and talk with him. But he began to get so insistent and obsessed, and he doesn't understand that for me to go back there mentally,
yeah,
is slightly painful.
Yeah.
And I pay a price.
Like, so he said that, let me just get this straight one more time, I'm very sorry. He said that he never got a hold of you when he did talk to you.
On the website, and I just found it because a friend of mine said, you gotta check this out because I saw your name on there. And I went on there and it basically said that after repeated attempts, nobody among his research group was able to find me. I don't know how that is because the IRS and the post office can find me.
Well, it only took me like 10 minutes to find you on the internet.
Yeah, and so I went to the website. I tried calling the number. I left a message. I went to the website and I posted a response saying, I haven't disappeared. I'm right here where I've been. I was on the scene at 9/11. Afterwards, I ended up running a program for victims and survivors for 4 years. I know a fucking plane hit that building. I saw it. But, yeah, don't buy into his bullshit too much and don't even argue with him because you'll never win. And he's not going to listen to logic. He's still convinced that no plane hit the Pentagon. It was a missile or a bomb. The only way he will ever understand is if he can somehow go back in time and be there.
I guess that's about the only way, because that's
because he's just not having it. And you know what? You can take anything that I said and twist it to mean whatever you want.
Right.
And that's what he seems to do.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
And God bless him because he does it well.
Yeah, he's very good at what he does.
Yes, he is. And he's got himself cemented into a position that he cannot deviate from because in order to deviate from it would pretty much, negate everything he's done.
Yeah, he's too far in to say he's wrong, I guess.
Exactly.
I even just called a guy, Peter Kopp from USA Today. I just talked to him 2 days ago to tell him about what John Gold's doing tomorrow morning in Washington at the White House at 10 a.m., chaining himself to the fence to, ask for justice and accountability in a respectful, symbolic civil disobedience action. But I had just talked to him the other day, and I was telling him about CIT again, and he was just like, oh man, like he goes, those guys are idiots. They're ridiculous. Why are they doing this? I don't know. But like, you know, but there are people that are very, very, very upset with what they've done and with how they twisted their words and made them sound like they never saw a plane hit the Pentagon when they saw the plane hit the Pentagon with their own eyes. Like, it's pretty disgusting.
And I've talked to a couple of those witnesses myself, and I've never even made that public. I talked to Lloyd England. I talked to Keith Wheelhouse. You know, so you know, it's not like I haven't done any work there. I just haven't brought some of it forward. You've done a good enough job with that, really.
Well, it was only because, like, I was trying to. I didn't do it because I had to convince myself. I'm just trying to convince these 9/11 truthers out there that they're wrong, but it doesn't. It seems like if I talk to, I could talk to 1,000 witnesses and they'll still. I don't know. It's just so hard to get them to even. I don't know.
And I've had recent debates with people who agree with me on most everything else, and they don't agree on this, and that's fine. I can disagree with people on things, but I try to show them. It's funny how much sometimes they're just not aware of. Like, I showed one particular person recently just all the images of all the plane wreckage that was there, and they had never seen it. And they said, "Why haven't I seen this?" From some of these other people.
Yeah, most people think that there's just that one pristine-looking piece of the fuselage laying there on the grass, that it's the famous picture of, that piece of fuselage laying on the grass there. They think that there's that and a 16-foot hole in the Pentagon.
Yeah, and I don't think it's kind of impromptu. I don't think I've spoken of this issue quite as eloquently as I could. But I will say that I made a video called Debunking CIT in under 11 minutes. It's on YouTube. Go look at it.
Is that the one where you used the Chewbacca South Park thing?
That's one of my other blog contributors, actually. I took a less humorous view of it, but that one's called CIT Deception.
The CIT Deception trailer. Yeah. That's one of the greatest videos I've ever seen.
In a world without facts, two men and a group of pilots seek to destroy 8 years of credible research.
The single greatest strategy for keeping the crime of 9/11 concealed and propping up the official story is to play false counter-myths against it, have false theories that are identified with the entire body of work to the public about 9/11 truth, and therefore discredit that entire body of truth and prevent a genuine investigation into the crime.
Using a few eyewitnesses who saw the plane hit the Pentagon and a flight data recorder that was found at the Pentagon, they claim to have proven that a plane did not hit the Pentagon.
They're their own little universe. They don't give any credit to anybody else, as if the only challenges to the official story are this idea that no plane crashed the Pentagon, as if none of this other stuff exists.
This is exactly what the media preys upon when they go out there and seek to discredit us.
They say it cleared the roof of the Pentagon and flew over and blended into air traffic. Somehow everybody missed that. But what are the other possibilities? Did it go into a space-time warp and pop out somewhere else? In their reality, it's as though the other sides of the Pentagon don't exist. You would be notified of this event by the explosion. You would see this very distinct image, an unforgettable image of a 757 flying away from this explosion as if it had bombed the building. It would be unmistakable. That would have generated hundreds of actual reports. And yet we have not a single report that fits that event.
The frivolous issues have been exaggerated.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Chewbacca.
The legitimate questions have been ignored.
We have more than enough evidence to convict.
And ordinary citizens have been accused of mass murder.
They even accused Lloyd England, the taxi driver, of being an accomplice. Publicly accused this man of being an accomplice with no evidence whatsoever.
All the 9/11 conspiracy websites are run by the government. The 9/11 conspiracy is a government conspiracy.
When you really look at what they did, it's despicable.
There's a really good chance he's a disinformation specialist. Now, can I prove that? No, I can't. So I'm not going to say that he is. I can just point to his behavior.
look at what their track record is. They have their theory. They find witnesses to support their theory. The other witnesses either don't exist or, worse than that, they were all plants or agents.
They interviewed over 150 first responders from the Pentagon, including people who pulled out body parts of the passengers and put them in little bags, including people who took out the engine from the plane, people who took out the seat, people who picked up the sheet metal from the plane with the American Airlines insignia, people who said they smelled jet fuel, people who picked up luggage, shoes, little pieces of little girls that were passengers on Flight 77. And yet 7 years later, he refused to acknowledge, keep this evidence. It's just bizarre.
I look at the idea of Occam's razor and the idea that the simplest explanation is usually the most likely, and I think, how much stuff would have had to have been fake? Why not just fly the plane into the building?
The CIT deception, the hijacking of the 9/11 truth movement.
Yeah,
that is a good
funny
one.
Because there was actually an individual later who actually made a film called The CIT Deception, but he didn't know that person. They actually, so it's kind of like he made a trailer for a fake film, and then they ended up making a real
Yeah, I think that might have been Broken Sticks who did that, where he was showing how CIT chopped and skewed Roosevelt Roberts' testimony to make it sound like nothing like what he actually said. And unfortunately, Roosevelt Roberts is so angry with what those guys did to him that he won't talk about it to anybody ever again. I did talk to his wife, though, and she said that he never, ever said that. So those guys are lying, as they're so good at doing.
If I could go back to, we were talking about incompetence, I do want to read something that David Griffin had written before, which I like. It's, he says, he's talking about incompetence, and he says, although this explanation has been widely accepted, is it really believable? If our military had been guilty only of confusion and incompetence on 9/11, it would have been strange for its officials, by saying that they had been notified by the FAA earlier than they really had, to open themselves up not only to the charge of criminal fraud, but also to the suspicion that they had deliberately not intercepted the hijacked airliners. We are being asked to believe, in other words, that Scott, Arnold, and others, in telling the earlier story, acted in a completely irrational manner that, while being guilty of only confusion and a little incompetence, they told a lie that could have exposed them to being charged with murder and treason. And I don't think it can be said any better than that, honestly. I mean, that sums it up.
Well, David Ray Griffin, he does say some good things, but as respectfully as I can say, he is very misinformed about there being no seatback phones on Flight 77, because I talked to one of Renee May, personal friends, who is also a flight attendant who still works for American Airlines, who worked on American Airlines very frequently, and she told me absolutely that there were airphones on Flight 77, although only 5 operated at one time. So David Ray Griffin is very misinformed about that. And as far as the cell phone calls go, yes, cell phones did work on board the planes, and Verizon happened to be one provider in the Washington, D.C. area that got very good reception, so she has no problem in understanding how someone could have made a phone call from a cell phone. And there absolutely were airphones on Flight 77. So.
No, I believe you're right. I do want Adam to speak about that. I do believe he has something to say about that. I do want to say some things about CIT first, though, and I will say that I do not agree with all of David Ray Griffin's research, but some of it I absolutely agree with, and I do think he has provided a lot of material that's been quite beneficial to the truth movement. For instance, here in this article, we say CIT have 13 witnesses who all recollect a different flight path from the official story. To counter claims of fuzzy memory, CIT will argue that because they correlate with each other, it proves that they are all correct, because they couldn't all be mistaken the same way. If they were the only 13 witnesses, then we would agree. But they weren't the only 13. They were 13 out of more than 100. When you have that many witnesses, you are bound to have some correlation of incorrect recollections. That being said, the preponderance of reports support the plane hitting the Pentagon. This fact is not lost on debunkers, the government, or the media, always eager for easy ammunition against the 9/11 truth movement. And, they want to dispute those numbers. I've been in a debate with CIT supporters before that said, well, you haven't talked to all of them. I mean, you haven't gone through the list. Like Arabesque, you know, he has this list, and if you really break it down, you can see that the numbers aren't as high as he purports them to be because their point of view, you know, they couldn't have seen it. And that's where I think you can speak to this, Jeff, because you've talked to people who have basically said that they're misrepresenting their point of view of what they saw. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Right.
So, you know, and I was saying, you know, I've talked to a couple of the witnesses. I did, and it just didn't offer anything new, really. I mean, I'll go ahead and say it now. You know, I could have said it then, whatever. I mean, Keith Wheelhouse, he says he saw it. You know, he seems very genuine to me. They bring all these things up about him. I'm not sure exactly what they said about him.
Well, they're saying that he's lying about seeing the C-130 shadowing it. And if anybody, there was just a History Channel documentary that I just saw recently in the past few months called DC 9/11, which was all about the Pentagon. And there's people in that documentary talking about how there was a plane right behind Flight 77. So, and these witnesses were backing up Keith Wheelhouse's story about the C-130.
That's the thing. Everybody has to be lying or confused.
Oh, everybody's lying or deceived except Craig and Aldo. Yeah, exactly. It's ridiculous.
Lloyd England told me, he said, I don't know what pictures they're showing on the internet. I don't know what they're saying. But, you know, I saw what I saw.
They're using a distorted picture of the area when they showed Lloyd England. And that's why when he was looking at the picture with them on video, and he's like, I don't care what your picture says. I know where I was. Because they were using a distorted type of picture. So.
No, in Loose Change, he does say it happened so quick. It's like it happened so fast, I couldn't believe it actually happened, you know.
Well, strangely enough, Russell Pickering and Dylan Avery also went down with Craig and Aldo to do their citizen investigation. And Russell and Dylan know for absolute certainty that a plane hit the Pentagon. But for some reason, Craig and Aldo still seem to think that, you know, the plane never hit the Pentagon, it flew over the Pentagon. So, I don't know. Figure that one out, I guess.
I mean, maybe you can help me out with this whole thing with Lloyd England, though. I mean, on that interview, he kind of seems like, you know, I saw it fly over, and then, like, did he actually see it hit? I mean, he kind of said to me that it seems that he did. But if he's confused about it at all, I mean, it was flying at 500 miles per hour.
Yeah, I don't recollect him telling me he saw the plane hit. He just knows that a plane, he knows a light pole smashed into his car and he almost died, and he had to squeal the brakes on. So, you know, who cares if Lloyd saw the plane hit or not? I don't remember exactly what he said, but I know he's an honest, good, kind, hardworking man that's not lying, you know. And but I've talked to many, many other witnesses who definitely saw the plane, no ifs, ands, or buts about it, saw it hit the Pentagon, you know, like this.
And I got the same feeling from Lloyd. I mean, he's definitely an honest guy. And, like, you know, I think the quote was to the effect of, I know what I saw. He didn't say he saw it hit, I guess. You know, he's saying, I know what I saw. So he must be aware of some of the issues. And he knows enough to know that he's not happy with what they're doing. And,
well, as far as
they basically accused him of being involved, have they not? I mean, is that
they're going around saying he's an accomplice to the murder of over 3,000 people, and that's disgusting.
Question mark. You know what I mean? You have that question mark, and then it's okay to say something like that. But to me, it's not. I mean, and you know,
when it comes to their nitpicking about south of Citgo or north of Citgo nonsense. Like, it happened so fast that, you know, who was really concentrating, whether it was like here or, you know, 10 feet over this way. A guy named Darren McNulty posted some very good information about the problem with witnesses, and there's some good papers from a lady named Laura Engelhard, who does a lot of studies on psychology of remembering stuff and false memories, etc. So when those guys are concentrating on these small, fine little details that no one was really paying attention to at the time, all these witnesses really do remember was that they saw this big, huge Boeing 757 flying out of the sky and hit the Pentagon. You know, they weren't concentrating on whether it was here or whatever it was doing. And one more thing I'd just like to bring up is that if these witnesses were lying about seeing the plane hit the Pentagon, why wouldn't they just lie and say they were sure that they saw the plane hit the light poles? Because, you know, I've talked to them and I've asked them about the light poles, and it's hard for them to remember exactly that instance because it happened so fast. So no one yet has given me a definitive answer like, yes, I'm absolutely sure I saw the plane hit the light poles. But I just want to reiterate that if they were lying about seeing the plane hit the Pentagon, why not just say that they saw it hit the light poles too? I think it's because they're being honest and they're telling me the best they could remember after 9 years, what they saw.
Yeah, and CIT has tried to compare what they've done with eyewitnesses to the forensic evidence, for instance. They said it's just as good as the nanothermite. Excuse me, my ass. No, it's not. Forensic evidence is nowhere close to eyewitness evidence. When we have eyewitness evidence for the towers, it's in conjunction to the physical evidence that we see with the videos and the physics of what happened, and then it's in conjunction with the forensic evidence that we have. This is nowhere comparable. And you talked about eyewitness problems with eyewitness testimony. I have a blog all about it. It's called CIT and Eyewitness Testimony, and it actually shows you can watch a video on there, and it's a false memory example. And what he does during the video, the gentleman presents. He gives you an example of false memory. I can't recollect exactly what he does, but he shows through an exercise that he can give you your own false memory.
Is that where it gives you a list of words and then you got to remember and write down as many words as you can?
Yeah, well, yeah, and then I think it's like people they remember words that weren't even in there.
Yeah, I had false memory on the second one. I wrote a word down that wasn't on the list.
Yeah. But hey, maybe that doesn't mean anything to them. But then go to Wikipedia. It says eyewitness identification evidence is the leading cause of wrongful conviction in the United States. Of the more than 200 people exonerated by the way of DNA evidence in the U.S., over 75% were wrongly convicted on the basis of erroneous eyewitness identification evidence. And I even show an example of a woman who was looking in the face of her rapist and wrongfully convicted the man that did it. He eventually got exonerated on the basis of DNA evidence.
Well, there was another example too. There was another example too where some lady, she conducted an exercise where the people didn't know, but some guy came running into the room and grabbed her purse and ran out. And then she asked everybody to describe the guy. And they all had different descriptions. Some said he was wearing glasses, some said he wasn't, some said he was wearing a blue shirt, some said he wasn't. But the one thing that they all got correct was that there was a guy that ran in and grabbed her purse and ran out, so.
Yeah, and if people can't read between the lines on that one, I don't know what to tell you. And I think that was Oprah that did that, was it not?
I think it was that Eagle Heart lady or something. I'm not sure, but it was.
Well, anyway.
But Adam, do you want to chime in on this subject at all here?
Well, I haven't looked into CIT probably quite as much as either of you have, but what I would like to say about them and their methods and what they believe in terms of what the witnesses tell them, they're oftentimes very open to what the witnesses have to say. They believe them on a lot of stuff, not just about what side of the gas station the plane flew on, but also when they talk about, like different colors that people said they saw the plane. Some people said it was like a bronze plane or a gray plane. The CIT amazingly accepts all of this, and they kind of just think it may have been some kind of hybrid plane to look like a lot of different planes. And
no, they say the plane flew over the Pentagon, and everybody that claims they saw it hit the Pentagon was deceived or lying. That's exactly what they say.
And that's the thing. I mean, CIT seems like they believe the witnesses on everything they say, except when they say they saw the plane hit the Pentagon. That's the only thing every witness is wrong about, whether they
and that's the one thing
outside.
And that's the one thing that all the witnesses have corroborated on, that they all saw it hit.
Yeah, no one is agreeing with them. CIT guys, they take their word for it when they say they saw the plane on the north side of the gas station. They don't take their word for it when they say they saw the plane hit, which is really the more important detail here. And for as much as Craig Ranke wants to claim that all these people were fooled, I would like someone to go up to him and ask, if he was there at the Pentagon, would he have been fooled by this? Do you think you would have been fooled by this flyover magic show that you claim happened? Would you have been just as gullible and susceptible to fall for something like that?
Yeah, exactly. And it makes it even worse now that they've teamed up with Rob Balsamo's Pilots for Truth fraud, too, with their fake FDR analysis. So they've just got total nonsense.
What I want to say about that, they've used the flight data recorder constantly, and that animation that's in there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they say it shows the plane on the north side, and that somehow supports their theory. But that's the thing. They're taking this information from the black box that was found at the Pentagon, meaning that a plane had to have hit to have left the black box. You know, and
2 kids and a group of pilots go and talk to witnesses who say they saw a plane hit the Pentagon with using data from a black box that was found at the Pentagon.
And
shout out to you, Scootle.
What you could add there is if they said, oh, well, they planted a black box and faked the data. But then the problem is, well, why would you fake data that doesn't agree with what they're going to say is the official story? Why do fake data that doesn't match the flight path that they're going to say is the official flight path? You know what I mean?
You know, I just don't know. I'm so confused now.
And then there's this book, Firefight.
The battle inside the Pentagon, yeah.
Yeah. Well, they say as crews dug deeper, unmistakable remnants of a passenger plane were everywhere. Wallets, shoes, jewelry, and everyday items that had been stuffed into dozens of suitcases were littered throughout the debris. Firefight, page 426. When Scootle brought this up to them in their forum, and this and many other quotes from that book, oh, well, you know, he's just a media talking piece, you know, a talking head, something to that effect. They're just saying he's another liar, you know.
And the flight attendant that I talked
all
to,
the firefighters from the Arlington, Virginia Fire Department. So he's lying about what they said to him, or what? Whatever they're saying people are lying again. You see what I'm saying?
Everybody's lying except them, yeah, except those
Everybody.
If anybody's interested,
whatever. They'll probably try to nitpick us to death because of this conversation.
They go around and they try and smear me everywhere. But I'm used to it. I don't care. So, but I would just like to say, if anybody's interested, Frank Legg and Warren Stutt did a proper analysis of the FDR, and that could be found, at Frank Legg's website. I'll put links to all this stuff on later. Eugene Debs also did a very good short video called Perspective 77 that shows the different perspective in accordance to the Pentagon and the witnesses. And then he did a thread called Pentagon North Approach, a step back from the details, where he goes an in-depth analysis of a lot of the witness testimonies, and he's everything I just mentioned. These people are very good researchers, and they know what they're talking about. So I'd really suggest that people take a look at that information instead of just watching, the Pentagon.
Yeah. And I want to say, I think that on both sides of this argument that people have been too quick to throw out insults and things, myself included, even bordering on saying someone's disinfo or something. I can say it might look that way or whatever, but even that, it shouldn't even be said.
Aldo Marquis is just recently started going around on Facebook calling me a disinfo agent, and I work for the Secret Intelligence Agency.
Well, let him do that. You know what I mean? Let him do that. If I could read a little bit of something that's on my blog to people, I want to make it perfectly clear here.
Sure.
It's about the evidence. I posted a blog called A Clarification on Disinfo, and I said, a recent article by Eric Larson of Visibility911.com where he revealed that Peter Dale Scott does not endorse the Pentagon flyover theory. He relates the following concerning calling deep disinfo. And then there's a large statement from Peter Dale Scott saying that, that basically we shouldn't do that. Lessons from, let's see, what's he say? He says, in his message giving me permission to post, Dr. Scott said, I am now aware of CIT's ad hominem attacks on good people, which is a big reason why I'm giving you this permission. In my email to him, I had included a link to the CIT forum thread entitled Face to a Name, where they post names and photos. And, basically he was saying that, that's not good, but, personal attacks are not good either way.
So yeah,
I basically said these are all very good points, and everybody at this blog will be more careful with such terminology in the future. I said, that being said, we have demonstrated that CIT and their supporters use many of the rules of disinformation as outlined by Michael H. Sweeney. We go through those. I got into where I went on the Loose Change forum, and the topic was, why is CIT evidence omitted frequently? So I thought I'd provide an answer, and all I did was I posted a link to the visibility interview with Jim Hoffman. So Aldo responds, and he says, and your point? Doesn't that belong in the skeptics section? So does someone want to inform my daughter, my mom, my family, my friends that I'm a disinformation operative from the government? Michael Woolsey is a bumbling fool. Speaking of bumbling fools, Jim Hoffman is wrong on so many levels. I mean, this guy fucking used Google Earth to provide point of views for flyover witnesses using the old absence of evidence argument and claim us driving around on the highways with a video camera is deceptive. This idiot uses Google Earth flattened out, then writes an article on it that advises everyone to use Google Maps Street View, which is what we should have used in the first place, which, keep in mind, also is a camera sitting mounted at a feet on the roof of a car, not a person sitting inside a car. And so he goes on, and I said, first off, Michael Woolsey did not say that CIT was definitely engaged in disinformation. He actually said that he could not prove such a thing, but that he can point towards behavior. And then I said, I'll let Jim Hoffman's analysis speak for itself, and only add that I recently had the chance to see the Pentagon while on a bus ride, and that my first thoughts were how ridiculous the flyover was. And that is true. I went there on a bus ride. I saw the Pentagon. It is absolutely ridiculous to think that nobody would have seen that.
And that's what a guy
would have seen a plane fly over that building.
And that's
just go there, people. Go, just look for yourselves. Go there. It's ridiculous. And so I just want to finish, Jeff. I said, so because of this, Marquise calls Woolsey, who hosts the longest-running podcast for 9/11 Truth, a bumbling fool. Then he calls Hoffman, arguably one of the most well-researched 9/11 researchers ever, a bumbling fool, idiot, coward, and pathetic excuse for a truth-seeking researcher. That is name-calling and ridicule if I've ever heard it. And I said, also, after posting the interview on the Loose Change Forum under my username, InfoWarPatriot, which I don't really use anymore, but whatever, a CIT supporter attacked the name stating, InfoWarPatriot. Talk about blatant disinfo. How about Super 9/11 Truther or Totally Legit Patriot? Or I'm not disinfo, I promise. But hey, maybe CIT and their fans were victims of number 18 of the rules of disinformation. Maybe they were antagonized and goaded by their opponents. I mean, how dare Woolsey and Hoffman suggest CIT might be disinfo? It's not like they dismissed hundreds of other witnesses. Disinformation rule number 19, ignore proof presented. Giving easy straw men to debunkers. Disinformation rule number 4 suggests using a straw man, use one, pass one off, what's the difference? And accuses some witnesses of being cover-up agents or worse, active participants. It's not like their theory depends on an absurd amount of fakery, including wreckage, the flight data and cockpit voice recorders found at the Pentagon, human remains and DNA and identification, the aforementioned witnesses, and sleight of hand that would make Chris Angel look like a dime store magician. Disinformation rule 15 fit the facts to alternate conclusions. Oh, wait, yes, it is. But again, insinuating disinfo is a bit beyond the pale. CIT's fans may do that, but they never would, right? And then I post from 911blogger.com. And Reprehensor posted John Farmer's blog, Caustic Logic, and the Frustrating Fraud, blog, which is all about the fraud of,
right.
How they're misleading, how this is not what the 9/11 Truth Movement should be focusing on. And then the Arabesque blog, and he says, posting these, Reprehensor said, I'm just posting these, say what you will. Aldo responds, you are now guilty of promoting disinformation. So for anything they do, or for anything we've done, as critics of them, they are 10 times as guilty. So does that excuse us when we've went too far? No, it does not, and I apologize myself.
Well, they've attacked Frank Legg, calling him an idiot and a fool, Dr. Frank Legg. They've attacked David Chandler when he came out against their nonsense, saying that Adam Syed said he's lost all credibility in his eyes, etc. It's just ridiculous. But it's just ridiculous. But what you were saying about people going and seeing the Pentagon for themselves, I know a guy named Broken Sticks who went down to New York and Washington this summer to go look around at all the 9/11 places. And he came back and he said, Jeff, if you've ever been to the Pentagon or if anybody's ever been around that area, you would see, he said exactly what you said. It is the most ridiculous thing you could ever think, that a plane flew over the Pentagon and nobody saw it. He says if you went and saw it, it was ridiculous.
I laughed out loud. I was on a bus and I just laughed out loud. I just laughed. There's nothing else I could do. You know, LOL all day long. I did it right on the bus, right there. And then it was funny because there was a plane that flew by, and somebody said, "Oh, it's 9/11." You know, I just said, "Oh God, it was too much." But yeah, it's ridiculous.
And just another
the overall point of what I was just going to say, the overall point of what I'm saying is that for anything CIT's critics are guilty of, they are guilty of at least tenfold. So I apologize, you know, if we went too far and if I offend anybody even tonight, but I do not think they are correct. And
well, as they're going around accusing innocent victims that almost died on 9/11 as being part of the cover-up and being complicit in the mass murder of over 3,000 people, such as Lloyd England, somebody brought it to my attention, somebody named Eugene Debs on the forums. He did a little checking and he noticed that they've incorporated themselves. So it's CIT Incorporated. Whereas it almost seems to me now that they had a premeditated notion that if they went and smeared these witnesses or defamed or slandered these witnesses the way they do, and anybody tried to sue them for anything, they couldn't really actually reach Aldo Marquise or Scott Ranke, which is his real name, Scott Ranke, a.k.a. Craig Ranke. They couldn't reach them. They could only reach the corporation of CIT. So I thought that was very, very interesting.
No, I don't know. I have no comment on that one. I don't know anything about it. It's new to me.
Right. Okay. Well, we'll get off the subject. I know how you feel about the way I like to.
Oh, it's fine.
I have no problem. You know, I have no problem ridiculing people like that because I think they're just mean, rude, ignorant, evil people to just knowingly be pathological liars the way they are when they know a plane hit the Pentagon, but yet they continue this charade of a flyover. It's ridiculous. It's just like Jim Fetzer. It's just like Jim Fetzer and Morgan Reynolds and those guys. They know planes hit the World Trade Center. You know, these people are just they're pathological liars or something, or they're doing it for attention or for whatever reasons. I don't know.
I'm not here to bash people. I just think the facts, and I'm not saying you are. You're more than welcome to your opinion. I think I've spoke out pretty strongly about it tonight.
And I'd like to say one more thing, like that, what you were saying about Peter Dale Scott not endorsing them.
Yeah.
Well, they continuously use their praise page with all these people and these endorsements that they get from people. But as you said, Peter Dale Scott does not endorse them. Richard Gage does not endorse them. Aidan Moynihan, I just asked him on 9/11 Blogger just the other day, and he said he absolutely does not endorse any stupid flyover theory, and on and on and on. So they're using false endorsements. But anyway.
But yeah, it's completely true. I'm glad you said it. And again, you know, you're more than. Hey, I understand where you're coming from. I just think, you know, the facts speak for themselves, and the facts prove that they're wrong, and that's just kind of where I want to leave it.
Right. I just wish I just wish the 9/11 truthers out there would take a second look at what they think is true. That's all I ask.
That's the main thing. That's the main thing, and just look at the evidence and realize there is contrary facts to what they are claiming are facts.
Yeah, there's more out there than just the Pentagon video. But I think this was an excellent talk. We've covered a lot of information. Adam, is there anything you'd like to talk about that we haven't covered or anything?
I think we've really covered all the best parts. In fact, it actually sounds like we covered sort of everything that we plan to have as part of our film. You know, controlled demolition, you know, prior knowledge of NORAD, and CIT. These are all things we talked about being in the film, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I do want to say, I want to give a shout out to the people on the Pal Talk forum. You go to paltalk.com, and then you go to the 9/11 Truth Movement forum, or the 9/11 Truth Movement room. I had asked some of them to listen in tonight, and I don't know if they'd like to call, or if anybody else would like to call and ask us any questions. I do want to say that I think it's the first Sunday of every month that Richard Gage and always Richard Gage, I think, and sometimes Eric Lawyer, they go in there and answer questions.
Oh, okay. I heard that. I heard that on in December because David Chandler told me about it one time, and that was the only time I went in there and I listened to it. It was good. I liked listening to it. And that's where like David Chandler and Richard Gage did talk a bit about CIT, and Richard Gage did say that he does not endorse the flyover theory. But.
There's more information at that. There's an article that's not too far down on the AE911 Truth site about that, and I think they have a banner about it too. I don't know if any of those people are still listening. I hope I didn't turn any of them off with anything I've said, but
yeah, I don't know. I'm not. I don't know who's listening. If anybody.
Anybody to call in or.
Well, if anybody's out there listening and wants to call in, please feel free to call in. You just dial the number at the bottom of the chat and you enter the call ID and you're on the air. Everybody's unmuted. Yeah, please feel free to call in if anybody would like to join in. I don't know if anybody's listening. I'm hoping that the call's still being recorded. Actually, I don't even know if it's still recording, but I hope it is because I think it's an excellent conversation we had here tonight.
Well, if you can think of something to talk about for a second, I can at least check in with the room and see if anybody wants to jump in.
Okay, well, I'd just like to, in case people aren't aware of some research out there, like John-Michael, you mentioned Nafis Ahmed, who I just discovered recently. He's an excellent researcher, and he's got some material and some books out there that are just amazing information, where he's been talking about the same thing for years, as to go on facts and evidence and put everybody need to put their opinions aside and just concentrate on the facts and the evidence instead of what they believe happened. We can find out what actually happened after we get an investigation based on facts and evidence. I'd also like everybody to be aware of a researcher by the name of John Judge, who has a website called 911citizenswatch.org, and he also has a website, judgeforyourself.us, and he worked alongside the victims' family members, and he was one of the persons who were instrumental in leading the charge in the first place into getting the 9/11 Commission investigation in the first place. And he is a very, very, very thorough, excellent 9/11 researcher, and he, like a lot of the serious researchers out there, don't want anything to do with 9/11 truth because of the circus sideshow it's became with all these crazy conspiracy theories and no emphasis on the facts and evidence. But he's a very good researcher. His name's John Judge. There's many, many researchers out there. Michael Woolsey just put up a bunch of videos there yesterday or Friday morning. It's called the 9/11 Commission Report Card from 2005 with Cynthia McKinney. If you go to his YouTube channel, user visibility 9/11, so www.youtube.com/user/visibility 9/11, you'll find all those videos in full length on his YouTube channel. And there's so much good information out there. I wish people would just take a look at it. The stuff that Colonel Anthony Schaefer talks about, he's got some videos out there, and he was part of the Able Danger. He's got a book out called Operation Darkheart, which is good. There's a lot of really good books that people could read if they were so inclined to. I bought a whole bunch of books, and I received one, the one I mentioned before, The Commission, The Uncensored History of the 9/11 Commission by Phil Sheehan, the New York Times reporter, which has a lot of really good information in that. And then there's a few more books, like John-Michael said, Firefight, Battle Inside the Pentagon. That's an excellent book that anybody interested in the Pentagon, what happened at the Pentagon, should read. It's Firefight Inside the Battle to Save the Pentagon on 9/11 by Patrick Creed and Rick Newman. There's also one book that's really, really good to read would be from Nafis Ahmed, It's called The War on Truth, 9/11 Disinformation and the Anatomy of. And Anthony Schaefer's book, Operation Dark Heart, Spycraft and Special Ops on the Front Lines of Afghanistan. Even the book from John Farmer titled The Ground Truth. And a really important book also is Intelligence Matters by Bob Graham and Jeffrey Nosenbaum. And, of course, if you want to spend the money on George Bush's book, because he's got some stuff in there, Decision Points by George W. Bush. I would really urge people to look at the History Commons website, the complete 9/11 timeline at History Commons. That's a very, very, very thorough, factually documented website with information that's factual, not theories. Adam, anything to say? I just keep rambling on here.
Can I say something?
Yeah, let John-Michael go first.
Oh, yeah, I've been listening for a while here. I was just, I wanted to comment on some statements that were made about the,
is this a caller?
Yeah, it's, Chris from Oklahoma.
Oh, hello.
How you guys doing?
Good.
Hi, yeah, I wanted to ask a question about some of the people that are out there putting out information about 9/11. Do you guys think it's okay to maybe, have suspicions about some of this information that's coming out? I mean, you just listed off a laundry list of different people. A lot of them sounded like military or former military. Do you think it's okay to be a little bit suspicious of information that comes out from those channels?
Well, I think it's always good. It's always good to have a bit of suspicion on everything. Like William Cooper said, read everything, listen to everyone, believe nothing unless you can verify it yourself. But I mean, just because someone's military or government or in the media doesn't mean that they're automatically disinformation.
I agree there. And I just, I would have to think, and I think it's a pretty sound, assertion here is to, this is a psychological operation. 9/11 was a psychological operation. It was conducted by some people that have a lot of resources, a lot of power and control through what we call through our government. And so naturally you would expect there to be quite a bit of information put out there to divert people, to lead people in certain directions. And they may sound like they're in opposition or exposing something. And it's something that's a lot of people are familiar with. It's called limited hangout. It's what the CIA does and other intelligence groups will do. They'll put out information. And, it sounds very damaging to the government if you listen to it and you think, well, why in the world would they put this out if it's so obviously damaging to the government? And people can't grasp the fact that they put that out there. They don't care, really. I mean, if you know this stuff or not. I mean, some of it's mixed with truth, but, man, you have to look at it critically and think. And my position is I would reject it. I mean, if someone's coming out and they're a colonel or, like, say, someone like Bob Bowman or a Mormon like Stephen E. Jones, yeah, are you familiar with Mormonism? I mean,
Well, I would like to just say that one thing I do know I have experience with is disinformation because I've fell for it for so many years. So I've experienced every bit of, I've been sucked into all the disinformation out there when it comes to 9/11.
So Jeff, can I ask you, like, you've made a turnaround, like you say, you've kind of went away from, there being no planes and so on and so forth, and you're kind of going toward there's a plane at the Pentagon and all that, and like I wouldn't want to argue that because it's like what I wasn't there, I didn't see what happened, but as far as the videos being fake now, I will have to say that, it's something that's quite obvious to me anyway.
And you're talking about the videos at the World Trade Center?
I'm talking about the videos of the World Trade Center. I'm talking about.
Well, with no disrespect, Chris, it's just because you don't have a proper understanding of what you're seeing. Okay, if you just hear me out, you're obviously going on Fetzer physics, where they're talking about aluminum planes can't meld into steel and concrete buildings, blah blah blah. Okay, well, first of all, they're not taking into consideration the kinetic energy that was present at the time it hit at that speed. Okay. They're also not taking into consideration the fact that the cameras that caught the planes at the World Trade Center were at 29 frames per second, right? Normal cameras. Whereas you would see something like what captures a bullet or something in slow motion on the Discovery Channel. Those cameras are at 1,000 frames per second. Okay, is a big difference. So you're losing a lot of detail in the crash physics of it. Where
so just about just kind of like to maybe sum it up if I'm understanding it correctly. So any like anomaly or something that we see in there is probably some kind of JPEG artifacting or compression or something like that. Like where the building heals up around the wing is probably some kind of artifacting or something like that.
Yes, it's called frame blending and video interpolation.
Okay. Well, I wanted to present a video, and I wanted to get your take on it and some of the other folks that are viewing to take a look at this. And it's a really short video. It's like a segment of a 15-minute long video that's posted on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
And
what's the premise of it?
I really don't know the source, but it is like street footage. And it shows the jumpers and the towers burning and the.
Okay, I'd just like to know, what are you getting at?
Well, what happens here is you see a repeat of the same segment of footage. It's a 43 seconds of this video.
Are you talking about Phil Mayhem's fake jumpers, robotic mannequins being thrown out of the World Trade Center to simulate jumpers? Is that what you're getting at?
No, I'm not getting that at all. I'll post it into the chat, and you can go ahead and click on it and take a look at it. It's 44 seconds.
Okay, I'm looking at it right now. Grainy, crappy footage. Yeah, okay.
Very grainy, very crappy.
Right, so what am I looking for here?
So if you watch it all the way through, you'll notice that the sequence repeats twice.
First of all, I would just say that some person just made that like that and put it on YouTube. Where's the original source? I'm sure it doesn't show it like that.
But your contention is that maybe this was
done on purpose. Done on purpose by one of Simon Shack's people, like Ozzy Ben Oswaldo or somebody like that.
Okay, but here's the thing with this particular piece of video. If you watch it closely, the segment repeats twice. The second repeat of the segment, there's camera motion added. There's a person added into the frame. Yeah. The audio, which also repeats, is the dialogue is brought up in the mix on the second half of the video. So it's the exact same sequence repeating twice, yet the second sequence has added effects to it.
Well, I can take a video and put it in Sony Vegas and make it look like, Fred Flintstone's flying by in the video. It's not hard.
You can do anything with video with the software that people can get off the shelf, correct?
Exactly.
But can you do this? Can you make the perspective change? For instance,
really? Okay.
No. Just let me finish this thought. Can you have a three-dimensional perspective change within the video? In other words, can you take a video, an existing video, and let's say if you can't see the left side of the building, make it where you can see the left side of the building. Like move around through three-dimensional space with your software that you have.
You could do all kinds of things. If you want to concentrate on this one crappy, grainy 45-second video, okay, I'd just like you to be aware that as of the last time I checked, there's 58 different videos out there in public domain now, with also 31 photographs which show airplanes and airplane parts. So that is a bunk argument as far as I'm concerned. You're using some grainy, crappy video when I talked to many witnesses that saw and captured the planes at the World Trade Center, and there's so much footage coming out.
There's a lot of footage coming out. So you're saying that your contention is that since there's such a high volume of footage, that it's not it wouldn't be practical to fabricate such a high volume.
It's ridiculous.
Now let me propose something here to answer that, if you would be so kind as to allow me. This is going to invoke something that's speculation, but now if we're living in the year 2011, okay, we're still driving around with 300-year-old obsolete internal combustion engines. So obviously, to some degree, technology is being withheld from the population in general. Would you agree with that? That there's some degree of technology?
Absolutely. Whatever the black ops technology is, we're at least 50 years behind what they have. Oh yeah, sure. Absolutely.
So now, if you can take what we have off the shelf and look at let's take for instance a video game. Let's say take a PlayStation 3, the latest platform. I don't know if that's it, but anyway, and look at the photorealism, the near total photorealism of the images you'll see on there. Now, it wouldn't be too many steps beyond that to have complete 100% photorealism, would it?
No, not at all. It would be very easy. Just as one of the people that I talked to who captured the plane on video, he told me how, yes, it would be very easy to just add a plane into the video, no problem. You can make it look just as realistic as the real thing. But I'm telling you that there's thousands of people that saw the planes hit the World Trade Center.
No, okay. Jeff, but I want to finish up my thought with the high volume of video, which you said is impractical. And I would agree if you're using conventional techniques to produce this video, it would take countless hours. I mean, it would be just ridiculous. But if you take into account that there's more than likely something that the perpetrators would have access to that is beyond what we have access to, which is not a stretch. I mean, would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. But that doesn't mean video fakery on 9/11.
It doesn't prove video fakery, but I mean...
Like, could I ask you a question? I'd like to know, do you think that there's different flight paths of the second plane hitting the Trade Center?
Is there different flight paths? Well,
like, you know how that you got that one CBS dive bomber, it looks like it's diving out of the sky, and then if you look at it, you see, right? So that was...
what I see, Jeff, is I see a lot of, I see there's demons in the smoke. There's like freaking Hitler in the smoke. There's UFOs.
I know a guy that sees
the four horsemen of the fucking apocalypse in there, man.
Well, if you stare at the video long enough, you could see anything you want in the video. No, I'm asking you, do you think that there's videos of the second plane of 175 that show a different trajectory than another video?
You know what? There may or may not be, Jeff. You're probably talking about something. Now, I know there's the dive bomber footage, and there's you're saying, okay, could that be? Because, I think that could or could not be accurate. I don't know, man. I don't know. It's not even relevant because.
Well, I'm just telling you that's different vantage points, just in case anybody wants to know.
That could be, Jeff. That could very well be different vantage points.
Well, what is your smoking gun evidence for the videos being fake? Is that 45-second crappy grainy video you just showed me?
What is the problem? Is that it's grainy or that it's too short?
I didn't see anything in it that made me realize that no plane hit the World Trade Center.
Well, it's not. That's not my argument. That's what I'm trying to argue. I'm not trying to argue that no planes hit the World Trade Center. I don't even know why you're invoking that.
Well, you came on, you said, I'd just like to talk about these videos, and you're talking about fake videos and stuff. Like, do you believe? Have you watched September Clues? Do you think that's provocative? Do you think
you're taking us in a different direction here, Jeff? I mean, you're invoking no planes, that I'm a no planer, and that I'm some sort of Simon Shack alkali.
Okay, well, do you believe that
I didn't even go there, man. You're taking us there, and I'm not trying to even go there.
Okay, well, just ease my mind and answer the question, yes or no. Do you believe planes hit the World Trade Center, yes or no?
Do I believe planes hit the World Trade Center? You know what, man? I wasn't there, okay? So, like, if a plane hit it...
That's not a yes or no.
Do I... Now, I believe the videos were fake, okay? Clearly, the videos were fake, in my mind.
Okay, well, you haven't bothered to look at the evidence then. Okay, hello, John?
Yeah.
Okay, I just muted that guy. He doesn't care about the truth.
Jeff, will you mute me? This is Marcus Allen.
What do you want, idiot?
Really? So that's how you're going to start off?
Yeah, you're an idiot.
And
now,
tell me why I'm an idiot.
You want to talk to me about the NBC chopper footage versus the footage taken from the top of a building and tell me that that's the same footage and it was manipulated? Do you want to tell me how there's moving buildings on 9/11?
No,
do you want to tell me how there's fake jumpers? What do you want to tell me, Marcus?
I want to know why you're a moderator at Alex Jones' forum.
I'm a moderator there because some guy put me as a moderator there only in the 9/11 section without me even knowing it. Okay, and I just went there one day and saw that I had moderator status. So that's the answer to your question. No, I'm not on Alex Jones's payroll, and I'm not paid by the Illuminati. You said that in the chat last week.
No, I didn't.
Said, Jeff's on Alex Jones's payroll or something. Well, whatever.
And Jeff, if I remember last year, you had all kinds of nasty things to say about Alex Jones. Have you flipped on that too?
No, not at all. I think.
Then why are you a moderator at his forum? Why are you even at his forum?
To be able to put good information there in between all the crap stuff that's over.
So why don't you tell him to take you off his moderator status? Why don't you do that?
Alex Jones, I don't even think he has anything to do with that forum.
You're doing the same thing you're doing to Chris that you're doing to me. You're not answering my question. Why don't you just denounce yourself as a moderator?
No, because I like being a moderator there.
I see. So you like, that's cool. Mm-hmm. So why tell me why I'm a jerk off and all that kind of stuff?
Because you're going around talking about fake TV fakery, and you still go and promote stuff that's a lie. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if you're just too stupid to realize it's a lie, or you're doing it on purpose.
So you can't just agree to disagree with me and just move on?
No.
Why not?
Because that's disgusting to the pursuit of truth about 9/11.
Really?
That you would go around and keep pushing these stupid lies. I'm not going to put up with anybody promoting fake jumpers or empty buildings and nobody died and all the friggin' footage is fake and there was no planes, because I know it's not true.
Oh, because
so I'm not going to put up with anybody that does it.
Because you were there to know?
Because I know.
Wait, were you there to know? I wasn't there to know. I have no idea what happened, Jeff.
Well, you don't. Well, okay, are we really here, standing on Earth right now, or is this all a dream, Marcus?
No, you're pulling that bullshit. That's bullshit. Seriously, let's talk real here, and don't censor me and cut me off, because I know you're about to. You cut Chris off, and Chris didn't get to finish what he was saying.
I don't care what Chris has to say.
But it's very important, Jeff.
No, it's not important. If he
give me a second to explain?
He can go and learn about video, and he could go learn that what he's thinking is mistaken, and he could go learn real physics and realize that his belief in Fetzer physics is a bunch of nonsense.
Hey, Jeff, let me tell you what he's not going to come out and brag about this, but you want to know what Chris does for a living?
I don't know. What does he do? He's a video expert?
Photoshop.
Yeah. So he knows the jumpers are fake then, or what?
Well, I'm not going to put words in his mouth for him, but I'm going to tell you about that video that you cut him off from. And that is, the video repeats itself twice. Once in 2 dimensions, and the second time in a 3rd dimension. And the only entity that I'm aware of, and I think Chris is trying to allude to, and you cut him off, was that the only people who have that capability to do it are most likely the same people who pulled off 9/11, which would be the military. So I don't know why you cut him off. Take a look at the video. It's the exact same footage, 1 in 2 dimension, and one which I couldn't pay enough money to get software to do this in 3 dimensions.
Oh, but you're the one that talks about how easy it is to do all that stuff with
Patch
the
match.
soft patchwork. There you
No,
go.
patch match, and that is Adobe, but it doesn't have the capability that I'm aware of, and I'm into this, just as Chris is, to take two-dimensional video in real time and make it
Marcus,
three-dimensional.
you got me, man. You got me. I'm an Illuminati
I'm not
agent.
looking.
I'm covering for the fact that all the footage from 9/11 was created in a virtual Earth
Come on, Jeff,
simulator. And there's no victims too. They're all victims, or whatever the hell they're called. They're all fabricated out of cyberspace too, and it's all photomorphing and everything. And no one died on 9/11. It's all a big lie. And you know what, Marcus? 9/11 didn't even happen on 9/11. It actually happened on 9/12. Did you know that? So if you're going to go and say that 9/11 happened on 9/11, you're supporting the official story, buddy.
Your coyness isn't fooling anyone, Jeff.
Oh, you're an idiot. You are one of the biggest idiots I've ever met on the internet in my life. Yeah.
So you're going to cut me off?
Well, I was just about to, because I'm
Just
kind
do
of
it.
sick of your nonsense.
Do it.
Well, what else do you want to say? What do you want to say?
You know, Jeff, I can talk about anything. I'd like to talk about you. I'd like to talk about your guest, if that's okay.
What do you want to say?
I'd like to hear it.
All right, if you go to tinyurl.com, I'll post it into the chat, /empty towers, there's a spreadsheet put out by the Port Authority that shows that there were hardly any tenants in the building on 9/11.
So how many people were in the building on 9/11?
I don't know. I wasn't there, Jeff. But this is from... Now, is it possible that the Port Authority is in on the scam, too, and is fueling this no one in the buildings psyop? It's possible. But take a look at the list. And if you run down the list, you'll see that the buildings have been virtually empty since they were built in 1972, I believe.
The buildings weren't even really there. They were holograms.
Come on,
Didn't you
Jeff.
know that by now?
Let's have an adult conversation here. I didn't wait 3 hours to be spoken to like a child.
So what do you have to say about the guests I have on today? You said you wanted to speak about them, so speak about them.
Well, I'm asking your guest what he thinks about that link I just provided.
I'm not in the chat. I didn't see the link. We just provided the best evidence to prove this case. What do you think about that?
I don't believe it.
Well, I don't care about that.
Well,
I want to talk about how all the videos are fake.
I'm not talking about fake videos. I'm talking about...
I'm going to go with majority opinion on this.
Oh, I see. I see. So you're going with your...
I'm going to go with what is going to get 9/11 truth and justice accomplished.
So you're into groupthink, sir?
Oh, my God.
No, I'm into the best evidence. That's what I'm into, sir. I'm into peer-reviewed science and provable facts.
And they're not paid.
Go write for the Journal of 9/11 Studies or get it published somewhere else and prove something to me.
And you're saying peer-reviewed scientists are not paid off ever?
Did you just hear the conversation we had? I proved everything I need to prove about peer review.
Marcus?
Yeah.
Your wife's a teacher. She's part of the PSYOP. She's part of the education system.
I make fun of that all. I call her a social engineer.
Why don't you divorce her? Because you're in collusion with the enemy.
You meant maybe I should.
Well, do it. Be true to who you are, man.
Sir, there are plenty of records that show that the buildings were at least 80% full to capacity.
But what about the document I just showed you from the Port Authority showing the opposite?
I clicked on it and it still says it's transferring and not loading. I'd like to look at it, but there were a lot of records that show that the building, in fact, I think at most they were 98% filled.
Well, the USA, respectfully, sir, the USA Today admitted that the buildings were virtually half empty on 9/11. Now, why was that?
Well, I haven't looked at this link yet, so I can't say.
Where'd you find that document, Marcus?
Would you
let go for him?
Can I post it?
Go ahead. I'd like to look at anything you have to show. I'll look at what you're seeing, but I've seen other reports that say that the buildings were at least 80% full and at most 98% full.
And the New York Times admitted that there was a pre-planned drill that made, and I interviewed, by the way, that's correlating to this, I interviewed a survivor saying she wasn't allowed to go into work that day in the towers, I believe it was the South Tower, an hour before 9/11. Now, why would they not allow people in the building?
But there were people, we saw people, though, in the buildings, though.
You did? Where did you find that?
In the video.
They were jumping out windows and hanging out the windows trying to gasp for air.
Out windows and, people calling down from there. People were in the buildings that got out that said they saw people. There are pictures in the building of people running down stairwells and, there's proof there were a lot of people in the building.
Do you think that the news has never lied to us, sir?
The what?
Do you think that the media has never lied to us?
Absolutely not, but they don't always lie to us, and a lot of the people who took these pictures weren't media. These were just people off the street, people in the buildings that, took this footage.
Uh-huh. Who were able to take pictures of jumpers that were perfectly centered the entire way down. You know how impossible that is?
Because you're a Photoshop expert,
I've never tried to videotape a person. I've never tried to videotape a person jumping out of a building.
You might want to try it. It's like impossible.
Well, no, I'd like to never have to do that.
Oh, me neither.
Hey, Marcus, you want to talk about documents? Do you know that there was a document that just came out on January 10th? You could find it online if you look. It's a court document, actually. There's a lady suing Puff Daddy because she said he brought down the World Trade Center.
I heard that, Jeff. I would like to answer this gentleman's question. Here it is from the USA Today. I'm posting the link into the chat so you can see it. The buildings were half empty when the jet struck. USA Today estimates 5,000 to 7,000 people were in each tower when the attack began. That was the USA Today. And the New York Times, and I'll post that too, it says, just before the South Tower collapsed at 9:59 a.m., a spurt of calls reached the 9/11 operators. One of this was from Shimmy Beeglitson, who worked for Fiduciary Trust in the South Tower on computer systems. And here's the important part. He was on the 97th floor, where by chance, this is the New York Times, an emergency drill had been scheduled for that day. I'll post both links for you. So why were the buildings empty that day? Or virtually empty that day?
Well,
you don't know that, Marcus. You weren't there.
That's true.
No,
It wasn't, but I'm going off of what the official story is.
Well, but
so now you're
you just talked about how the media lies, but you're going off of a media report.
Well, no, I'm asking you if you're a debunker to debunk it. That's what I do. I look at what they tell me.
When did we say we were debunkers? Have you been?
We're debunking the debunkers.
I have been listening to you for 3 hours, and it's been kind of.
You got that wrong. Really, your comprehension of what you heard is not very good.
Okay.
Well, Marcus, I appreciate you bring up this point about foreknowledge about what was happening that day. Remember Carmen Taylor?
You see, I don't get into this. Is like talking about Hulk Hogan and Iron Sheik.
No. Do you know who Carmen Taylor is?
Of course,
right?
the AP, the one from Alabama, and the AP picture and all that.
She took the most famous picture of Flight 175 just before it hit the South Tower.
And the XF data shows no such thing.
Okay, when she was on a bus.
You see, you're jumping over my facts, Jeff.
Yeah,
you know you can change
facts.
You know you can change, Jeff. You know you can change XF data. That XF data from every single 9/11 picture has been changed. Every single one.
Yeah, I went and changed some of the XF data and some of the pictures to 1776.
Right, that's my point. I agree, and that was great that you were able to show that. And that proves, again, that you cannot trust a single picture that comes from the AP because they have a policy to scrub every single. If you get an AP picture and do XF data on it, every single picture is scrubbed of XF data.
Sir, I'm reading this thing you're talking about, they say the buildings were half empty, but, other reports say they weren't, and this doesn't provide really a source for where it gets this. I mean, all it says is that USA Today estimates 5,000 to 7,000 people were in each tower.
Uh-huh.
But it's USA Today. What does that mean? That they estimated themselves? Who estimated that amount? Who actually did the estimation?
That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my life. Why would the USA Today, which is a front of the military who did 9/11, why would they admit, buried all the way in the back of their newspaper where no one can see it except for people like us trying to find the truth? Why would they admit it? That
you're really
buildings
trying
were
to find the
empty
truth,
that
Marcus.
Why would they admit? Why would they even publish that? What would be the purpose of saying that? And why would the New York Times admit that there was a pre-planned fire drill for that day? How come no one's talking about that?
This was only a few months after the attack. It's possible they could have just gotten bad info. They could have been wrong.
Of course. Come on.
Well, why is that impossible?
Because you're making excuses for them. They have lost the benefit. The media has lost the benefit of the doubt. They lie about everything.
Why is your theory more believable?
I don't have theories, sir. I don't go with theories. I go with facts.
Like we were stating.
But sir, I mean, listen, you have to have an alternative. Why do you think the buildings were half empty?
It doesn't matter what I believe. I go by what I've discovered and investigated. I spoke to a survivor who her mom looked me in the eye and said, you know, that's very interesting. My daughter was a survivor, and she wasn't allowed in the building because of a pre-planned drill that day. An hour
that's
before.
Not proof in itself that the building
really
was half empty. No, that just proves she wasn't allowed in the building for some reason.
Why would they not allow on that particular day that woman to go into the building? Is it just coincidence?
Marcus, that's hearsay. That's not admissible in the court of law.
I don't care about the court of laws. They're run by the same people who rule over us.
Okay. You should call USA Today and ask
I don't want to talk to controlled opposition. No, well, although I'm thinking I'm doing that right now.
I knew you were going to say that.
Sir, listen, I have nothing but a quest for the truth. I don't think this is the truth. It's not something that's provable. You can speculate all you want. We're not trying to deal with speculation. We're trying to stick to the facts.
Well, let's go with the facts. If you look at the video on 9/11, this is a fact. The fact is, concrete and steel dustified midair. Anyone disagree with that?
Yep.
Okay, go ahead, Jeff.
Dustification is not a proper word to describe what happened.
Then school me, Jeff. What happened if you slow down the video?
No, wait a minute. He's saying the steel was dustified.
Yeah?
Where is your evidence that it was dustified? I saw a lot of steel in all the pictures I've looked through and all the videos.
Well, if you look at controlled demolition, that's a 35% ratio. In other words, if you have a 100-story building, you should have 35 stories of debris left.
You have to also remember that all the debris didn't fall in on the footprint either. It was spread out.
I don't think you're listening to me, sir. If you look at any controlled demolition, it's a hard, fast rule. Ask anyone in the business. I have 35% debris pile.
But the debris fell out. That's assuming that all the debris lands in a pile. It fell outside the footprint of the building and it was spread out.
Let's assume that you're right about that.
Well, it is. The walls peeled out.
Do you think it's possible that a 1,100, two of them, actually 9 buildings came down that day? Of course, you guys don't talk about that.
Because they didn't.
Oh, really? Okay. I'd be happy to post links about that too, if you'd like.
I would be happy to post links. I'm not in the forum.
Okay, so anyway,
5 didn't fall.
So you're telling me 1,000
into some of the buildings.
1,100 feet of steel and concrete created a debris pile that we could see of less than 30 feet. You think that's possible?
A debris pile?
Why?
A debris pile.
No, I'm saying that it's possible if debris doesn't fall in on its footprint. If the debris is spread out, it's like if you have a Jenga set, if you spread out all the pieces, of course it's not going to be a particular height. And in the videos, you see the walls of the towers peeling out. That's what happens.
I'll ask you one more time. 2 buildings, over 1,100 feet in the air, the highest part of the debris pile is 25 to 30 feet. Do you really believe that?
I'm not sure what you're saying.
When you look at the pictures of Ground Zero,
I see steel.
The walkway. You're just totally disrupting me, which is rude.
That's part of our phone and tele operation.
If you look at the walkway that goes from the buildings, which is still there, the debris pile doesn't need. Of course, there's perspective, so maybe it is a little bit higher. But in my estimation, it looks like it's about 25 feet total above the ground. And by the way, we were told that the basements were relatively unscathed, so it didn't go into the basement.
I never heard that. I have to.
Well, maybe you might want to look into it.
Okay.
So let me repeat before I get cut off here. Let me repeat what I keep saying that no one who's real has disagreed with. Steel and concrete was dustified in midair. All of the conspiracy theories that have been put out there could not have done that.
Who told you that? Judy Woods?
No, I don't believe Judy Woods is real for a second.
Sir, please, you have to understand that if the steel had been dustified, shouldn't there have been evidence of that? The most of the dust they found was, it was concrete and gypsum board and glass. Shouldn't we see something that indicates that the steel was dustified?
Well, I don't know if the videos that we were shown. I don't think there's a real frame of footage at steel on 9/11. So I'm going off what the media showed me. And when you
How
slow
many
up the
people
videos,
have to be lying for all the videos to be fake?
let me finish, please.
Okay.
If I slow down the videos, steel and concrete and everything else you're talking about was dustified in midair. I do not think what we saw on the media. I do not think what the media showed us really happened in New York, but I wasn't there to know. All of the conspiracy theories that were told, from jet fuel to nanothermite to controlled demolition to everything like that, could not justify steel and concrete.
But what about the people who were there who did say there was steel and that there were planes? I mean, the people were there and said the exact opposite of what you're saying.
I have been trying now for, it's been over 9 years, right, Jeff, since 9/11?
Mm-hmm.
9 years to talk to a real person. And
well, how come I can find
able
so
to
many?
talk to a real witness.
Hey, how come I can find so many? No problem.
You're
a lot of,
and you're in Canada, and I'm 2 hours away from New York.
Well, Joe, I guess I'm a psyoper.
But if you would just let me finish, I've yet to find one witness whose story coincides with every other witness.
But would you expect them all to be the exact same?
Not all exact, but certainly close.
But they all say...
What, they all saw a plane hit the World Trade Center, and they all saw the World Trade Center come crumbling to the ground.
I've talked to about a dozen people at a resort. I go to a resort here in Lancaster, and they've gone from some people didn't see anything, most people said they didn't see anything, to someone said they saw the biggest plane they ever saw in their life, to someone saw a prop plane, to someone saw a Cessna plane. No.
They all said it was a plane. They all said they...
No, you didn't hear what I said. Most of the people I spoke to said, it was weird, I didn't see a plane.
Well, some of them weren't in the position to see it. Some of them were on the other side of the building. Even if
I've made my point. I appreciate your time. Have a good night.
Okay.
Dumbass.
Thanks, sir. Thank you for that.
So there we have a perfect example of a 9/11 truth card.
You know, I think the previous 3 hours we did spoke enough to that conversation to where I didn't need to say anything else.
That just proves our points right there.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I mean, hell, I don't even know. I'm at a loss for words. Sorry.
That was the first snowplaner I ever personally talked to, so this was a rare night for me.
Oh, there's some better ones out there.
I was just eager to throw shots out there. We're debunkers. Okay. I guess he's saying we do debunking. Yes, we debunk the debunkers. Sometimes we do agree. We do debunk people who profess to be truthers like himself. So I'll tell you what. I will be more reasonable and calm later, Jeff. If you want to send me any links that he was showing you guys, because I wasn't in the chat, go ahead. Send them to me, please. Email them to me, and we'll debunk the hell out of them later for him.
Everything he said's already been debunked by very good researchers.
That's what debunking is. Debunking the debunkers or anything. It's just already.
It's just nonsense.
I don't really have to do. Listen, Jeff, I don't have to do much work most of the time. I just find stuff that's already out there because it's already been done.
It's just nonsense. Like he tries to tell me his smoking gun evidence is this one shot were from the NBC chopper and it's missing the background in the other footage. But he doesn't, I don't know if he's too stupid to understand. I've tried to explain it to him a million times. It's two different videos. One's from a chopper, one's from a camera on a building. He just doesn't get it, unless he's just pretending not to.
We can't trust anything we see, right? Is that something he told us, guys? Answer that first. And I want to make this simple. Yes or no? Can I get a yes or no out of both of you?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So why does he trust that the pile was only so high?
Well, because he's cherry picking.
You get my point, though? You know what I'm saying?
Fits what he believes. Oh, he'll take it.
What's that, Adam?
It fits what he believes, so he'll take it.
I mean,
even though this is a serious issue,
we're thrown 1,200 feet, sometimes 1,800 feet in diameter. Am I wrong with saying that?
Pieces were sprung out like 600 yards and stuff, and speared into other buildings and stuff.
And also, we know there had to be a lot of force hitting the ground because the bathtub was badly damaged. You know, justified steel can't do that much damage to the bathtub.
Oh, but Judy Wood would say that there was no damage to the bathtub.
Yeah, I've heard
How many witnesses? How many witnesses did we see in the streets covered in dust that said they were in the buildings and barely escaped? I mean, how many have you seen, guys? There's a ton. If I was to sit there and try to debunk what he's saying, I could do it. It would take me a lot of time to compile all the clips and everything. And that's why, you know, we debunk debunkers because they have some pull. You know, they have these hit pieces in the media that a lot of people see. So it's worth debunking. And CIT, they've gained some traction, so it's worth debunking. So with him, I don't know anything else to do except just get aggravated.
Well, as he says that he's never found a witness that was able to say anything. I've talked to almost everybody that I could find that took video or pictures of 175 that day. I mean, I still talk to Carmen Taylor almost daily through email and stuff. She posts at my forum all the time. Like, I can call her anytime I want. These people aren't perps or working for the Illuminati or whatever. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I do want to say, in the Pal Talk room was listening. I guess I talked to one person in there. It's kind of empty now. They were listening to the conversation. The one person that was in there told me they liked it, that everyone was listening. I just think we went on a little bit too long, and a lot of them just kind of drifted out. So, it's unfortunate. I would have liked to talk to some of them as opposed to him. But
well, I would just like to say, though, like, you know, this is a serious issue, and there is no disrespect to anybody that lost their lives or is still losing their lives because of September 11th, 2001. But that was comic relief right there with Marcus Allen. You know, that's all you can actually say. It's comic relief. It's so stupid that you can't help but laugh at it.
I was just trying to explain to him that the reason the pile wasn't very high is because not all the debris landed in the footprints, and I don't see what's wrong with that. You know, it's in the videos you can see the debris falling outward, and you know, that's why the pile isn't very high. Again, you can do that with anything. You can pile leaves in your backyard, and of course, if you spread them out, it's not going to be as high, obviously.
He wanted to ask me questions. Well, it automatically brought a question to my mind. You know, you wanted to talk to me. You've been listening to us for 3 hours. Tell me why I'm wrong. You know, let's get into that. And all he did was call it a conspiracy theory.
Well, he just did like I saw that lady doing at when she was talking to Navisa Med on that one C-SPAN video where she's asking a question. She's pretending to ask a question, but really she's just trying to spew out a bunch of nonsense, just like he was doing. He was just trying to spew out as much nonsense as he could, thinking I was going to cut him off.
And, you know, agreeing to disagree, we didn't talk about that the whole show. So we pretty much agreed to focus on what we want to focus on. So leave us alone. We're not the ones attacking you.
I don't agree to disagree. I think that's wrong. I think I'm not going to agree to disagree with somebody that says that there was nobody died or there was no planes or that the buildings were empty or everything's fake and the jumpers.
That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying we weren't focusing on him, but he wanted to come in and promote his stuff. Yeah. Go do that elsewhere. We weren't talking anything about anything you're saying. We weren't debunking it. We weren't doing anything like that. So why can't you just let us be with what is verifiable good evidence? And he said it's not. That's what he said. He said it's not. So whatever. If anybody listened to that 3-hour conversation besides him, I'm sure that 90% of them will agree with us. Oh, am I going with groupthink? No, I'm going with evidence.
Going with facts and evidence.
You know, I'm reading actually. He linked to 2 articles and they actually contradict each other. The USA Today article he linked says that there were somewhere between 5,000 and 7,000 people in the towers. And another one he put up from the NY Times, it says there were 15,000 people. So clearly one of these has got to be wrong. So, you know.
He's debunking himself with his 2 articles.
Right, yeah. It says that might seem like a small number of calls, given that approximately 15,000 people were at the Trade Center that morning. So, you know,
anyway, he doesn't believe anything the media puts out. So why is he trying to base a theory off something the media puts out? It makes no sense.
It doesn't make sense. I mean, most of the reports I've looked through were at least 80% filled and at most 98% filled. So
that stuff is the reason why nobody has taken this stuff seriously for so many years.
Yeah, it's amazing that we have the conversation we just had, and that's what we get.
And then that's what comes in at the end, like him and the other guy. Like, And I'd just like to let people know out there that are saying garbage like that, you're disrespecting the people that died that day. You're disrespecting the family members. You're disrespecting 9/11. You're disrespecting the day of September 11th, 2001. And it's just rude and it's wrong. And
absolutely. Yeah. That's one of the things that we have to do. We have to be respectful to, people that day.
Yeah, exactly. Unfortunately, there's always going to be people out there like that. Like, I mean, I'm surprised he didn't say shape-shifting reptilians took down the tower. What can you do about those kind of people?
Yeah.
But I like I said before, I'm glad we covered everything we did. I think it was a very good conversation, very informative, and on all kinds of subjects concerning the events of 9/11. But I thank you guys very much for putting this together and coming on and talking to me about this. I learned a lot myself tonight, and I hope anybody that listens to this, I hope they get something out of it too. Besides the laugh at the end, but, I just want to say to you, John and Adam, thank you very much for coming on tonight. I'd just like to point out that you guys have your website, 911debunkers with an s.blogspot.com. And John-Michael, you also have a blog over at Michael Woolsey's Visibility 911 website too, visibility911.com.
Well, thanks for having us on, Jeff.
Oh,
yes,
it's my
thank
pleasure.
you very much for having us on.
My pleasure, guys. My pleasure. Thank you very much to you, John, and thank you very much to you too, Adam. Before we go, I'd just like to say my thoughts and prayers go out to everybody in Egypt right now and everybody that's going through that terrible situation over there. I'm very sorry that all you people are going through what you're going through when there's no need for it. And you deserve freedom, and you deserve liberty, and you deserve to live in peace just as much as anybody else does in this world. And I'm very sorry that you're not getting that opportunity yet.
Amen, brother.
Yes,
all right.
Absolutely.
Well, everybody, thank you very much for listening to this special Sunday night episode of Pump It Out Radio this January 30th, 2011. I also want to remind you that tomorrow, Monday, January 31st, in Washington, D.C. at the White House, Mr. John Gold will be holding a symbolic gesture of civil disobedience. He's asking for justice and accountability for the people that died that day, for the family members, for the survivors, for the first responders, and for everybody in this world who hasn't been told the truth about a very significant day that's affected us and will continue to affect us all our lives if we don't do something about it. So thank you very much, everybody, for listening to Pump It Out Radio. Take care. Bye-bye.
See me die and see me fly. I call all the shots.
stop. You never home, gotta call me on the yacht. 10 years from now, we'll still be on top. Yo, I thought I told you that we won't stop. Now what you gonna do with a crew that I'm running much longer than y'all? Been a team much stronger than yours. Violate weed, it's a videotape. We don't play, restaurant. Be on your way, tested in enough time here. Ain't enough time here for you to shine here. Deal with many women, but treat God's fair. And I'm bigger than the city lights down at Times Square. Yeah.
on the cover of Fortune, 5 down below. If I roll 100